So today I'll be sharing some of the input that I gathered from many sources, such as website, books, and so on. And also I have incorporated some of my own uh, experiences as well as the FRGS proposals into this training slide. All right, so after we have completed the training today, I will email to all, or I'll ask Hazim to email to all the participants the slide. So the slide will be made available for all of you all. So just a disclaimer here, I always do that for my training because what I want to mention here is that nowhere in this slide I will claim that this is what you say, I am the expert in writing the proposal and so on. I am also always learning. And if you have some input in your side or some suggestion or some contradicting opinions, I'm more than okay to have some discussion during the training or after the training and so on and so on. So together we can share our thoughts on the experiences on writing a proposal. Because if you look at the research title here by itself, right, it is a proposal writing. So this training is supposedly we are catering, we are going to cater to how do you write a proposal for a funding for a research grant. Okay, the research grant here meaning to say that you are applying to some organization, can be private entity, ministry, and so on, for funding to fund your research project. Apart from that, journals, yes, you can write a proposal in certain journal bodies or also certain publication which allow proposal to be submitted. And definitely true for the postgraduate students, at least for the research and also some part coursework based student, you will definitely need to write a research proposal. And for postgraduate student, you will definitely need to defend that proposal. So for postgraduate students, you will have a time during your postgraduate studies is that PGRC, the Postgraduate and Research Center, will email to you all. Okay, your time is now up for you to do your proposal defense. So it will be in the span of 9 months to a year, and you will need to defend whatever proposal that you've written to the member. We call it the proposal defense committee. So you will definitely have at least two experts in that particular defense session. Then you will defend your proposal. So overall, this particular training is quite important because you need to know what are the items important for you to write a perhaps a proposal. Instead of saying good, we say something acceptable for us to go forward and indicating what we want to do for our research. Okay. All right, so basically this is my content. We will see these are all the things. There are subsection in some of this part as well. Basically, this is just an overview of the training today. Okay, since we have like a 20-minute break earlier, perhaps depending on our situation, if the content is still a lot more to go and we don't really have time, basically I'll cut short the break to maybe 10 minutes lah. But we still play by ear on the duration of the breaks lah. Okay, and then after we continue, we will have a second half of the session for proposal writing. Okay. Again, feel free to write to me or chat if you have any question. Now, I'm giving you all at least 5 minutes now. Please scan this QR code here. You will be navigated to something we call as a Padlet. I'm sure most of you all know Padlet. In Padlet, I want every one of you all here. I think we have 17 or 18 of us here. Please write why, first of all, why you attend this training, what is your expected outcome, what you want to gain out of this training. So when I see them, I can actually understand or cater my training to maybe focus on those things that you want to know more in proposal writing. All right, so we do this like 5 minutes. So now it's 2:33 here. Uh, maybe around 2:40. So 2:40, I will, turn on that Padlet and we will see it together and I'll start to address each of these questions. So please scan the QR code. If you have any issues, let me know. So I only have around six people writing here. So is there anyone else you want to write? I'm sharing it here. So yeah, if you keep writing, if those of y'all have written, if you want to rewrite also, go ahead, not to edit or just add more so you can. Yeah, we have one here, outcome expectation. To be able to write a decent research proposal. Okay, good. Have a better understanding on grant proposal writing in Malaysia. So yep, that would be good as well. To improve my writing skills. I hope I can help you in that. Even my writing skill also, I need to have multiple layer of help also lah. So in terms of your writing skill, uh, maybe I can help in terms of what are the points to include in while you're writing for a proposal. Okay, so the student is asking, can share again the QR code. So the QR code is here. Uh, QR code in the chat box. Can I send image in WebEx? Don't think I can send my image here in WebEx. Yeah, I don't think I can send the image of the QR code. Maybe the link. Maybe the link pull down, eh? Let me see if I can share the link. Ah, yep. So I have given the link, and I hope those who came late can click on this and write. Okay, so let us continue here. To improve my writing skill, any new update or any further information needed to pay attention while writing proposal? Yes, I have this topic also covered. Improve the writing skill in writing a research proposal. Again, or improve the skills in writing a research proposal. So in terms of skills, yeah, yes, there are pointers that I'll be giving up here, giving in here. Okay, able to generate an up to standard constructive proposal. Good. I hope I can help in that. To be able to write a proper proposal, yes, as long as you have all the items in, you should be able to basically address the concerns from the grant holders or whoever you are targeting to write a proposal to. Then the last one, to learn how to write proposal for grant and what make the proposal stand out. This is also a good points as well. All right. So basically, I see here around here, while we are saying, there are certain key phrases that I got here, like to improve the skill, meaning to say, overall, I think maybe most of us here, or maybe some of us here, we know what is the item to be inside a research proposal. But then again, we have some problem in terms of how do we communicate how do we communicate to the opposite person reading our grant in an effective way? How do we make sure that we address whatever that is expected from the grant holder in the way of writing? Okay, so I hope this training today we can address them as well. All right, so good. Keep those comments coming in if you have. All right. Yeah, so today's workshop outcome, basically at the end of this workshop, I expect all the participants to understand the basics of writing a research proposal and also to understand the do's and don'ts in writing a proposal. So under these two outcome of the workshop, I would have emphasized all those information regarding research proposal in so that you can understand the gist of it, or actually the what do you call the how do you hit it with a nail, hit the point with a nail so that people can understand this is what you are trying to convey or trying to say in your proposal. Another one thing is that we are not talking about language here. We are talking about how do we communicate knowledge to the readers that is reading our proposal, or grant owners or organization that wants to fund us. Language, there is a separate part which I will address also. Basically, at the end of the workshop or training here, I will also address about proofreading. Okay, so you need to have somebody or some expert in proofreading to basically, make sure that whatever you intend to say can be clearly spelled out. Okay. All right. So basically, what is a research proposal? So we go by definition. A research proposal is basically simply a short piece of writing that details exactly what you as an applicant will be covering in a larger research project. You are likely to be required to write one for postgraduate thesis or for research funding. So like, for example, the participant here maybe consists of staff, consists of postgraduate student. So your target is very important. Basically, though the proposal write-up is in generally the same for both, but what you target when you start to write a proposal, you will have some additional information there as compared to writing a proposal maybe for, proposal defense or so on. Okay. And of course, if some of the students here, if you choose to continue in academia after your master or your PhD, you will be writing your research proposal for your PhD and also dissertation and all other researches that you're going to conduct in case you are coming into the academia world because part of it is actually writing for research grants. Okay, so that one will be also we will also capture it here as well. All right, so before we go for proposal writing and what is the content and information there, we need to understand the types of research, at least for the purpose of what you're doing now. What I'm trying to say is that I would not say that grants are actually limited to only these two things. All right, though the application of this may be, but there are several kinds of grant that doesn't necessarily go on the fundamental basic or applied basic. There are a lot of grants on knowledge transfer, and there are a lot of grants on basically on just providing data set, which not too much into looking at the result of a research, but purely on funding people just to collect data. Then there is, like I said, the knowledge transfer. There is nothing got to do in researching, but it's purely on funding you to go and provide your knowledge to perhaps industry or some community and teaching them how to apply those particular knowledge that you have given them for the betterment of their community or also industry. So that being said, what you are writing now as a student or as a staff for proposals and also grants will normally cover these two larger entities, which is one, normally it's in fundamental research, or another one in applied research. As the name goes, when you talk about fundamental, we are talking about those, theories, new knowledge, certain novelties, suggestions, policies, and so on and so forth. And then when we talk about applied research, it is just basically you are applying certain research, maybe gained from fundamental research, and then starting to maybe consult to an industry or basically design a prototype that can actually be helpful for users and so on. So these two different kinds of focus in research, and there are a lot of grants on these two particular focus. So like for example, one of the participants was writing, what is the scenario of grant in Malaysia? So in Malaysia, they focus on these two things. So in Malaysia, we have this Ministry of Higher Education, and then we have the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, if I'm not mistaken, the name, MOSTI. So they are, and also we have this industry ministry, which is MITI, we call it, Industrial Trade and International. All these ministries, they do provide research funds. Ministry of Education goes into providing fundamental research grant as a core. So in Malaysia, you have fundamental research grant scheme, large research grant scheme, transdisciplinary research grant scheme. So these are normally goes on the fundamental research and they fund for purely on fundamental. The difference between them is just the quantum, the amount of money they provide, and also what is the requirement of collaborators for each of those particular grants. All right. And then in terms of applied or pre-commercialization, the Ministry of Higher Education will normally give out this grant called the Prototype Research Grant Scheme. This prototype research grant scheme is basically a grant that you will apply after you apply perhaps the fundamental research grant scheme, or maybe in your institution, you have been provided a fundamental research, maybe like a seed fund, whereby you want to now look into the pre-commercialization stage. If you talk about like, in NASA, right, they have like TRL1, TRL2, total readiness level of a certain product. So the PRGS goes in the level of TRL1 or 2 and so on. So basically more on before you commercialize, they fund you for your project. And then that being said, MITI and mostly goes purely on funding on innovation. They don't really fund too much into fundamental, but most of their grant goes into applied base. So that is the current scenario in Malaysia. Apart from that, then you have some industry grant, some private entity, international grants, like here we have the Toray grant from Japan, and then we have this Newton Fund from the UK government. Newton Grant also normally they fund not necessarily purely on research. They fund basically for maybe technology transfer or knowledge transfer, or basically they fund for certain experts to come to their country, and also deliver trainings and so on. So there are a lot. This is the current scenario in Malaysia, and the most important grant, at least in the context of the Malaysian education institution, is normally this FRGS, TRGS, LRGS, and also the prototype, which is the PRGS grant. Okay, so that being said, there are certain focus. I have applied for FRGS and I've also obtained FRGS grant. I've also applied PRGS grant and also go for interview. There are different kinds of way on how you're going to write those particular grant. And that's what we're going to see here. Okay, so if we talk about fundamental, you guys and girls surely understand that when you talk about fundamental, it's about basically a new research and goes on basic research. It can goes on new principle, new properties, new theories, and so on. And then when you go to applied research, it's basically whatever that you have done previously in fundamental, maybe you want to make it into a prototype. So you would have, apply those information, gain, or those output gain in fundamental to then do an applied research. Basically, those are the things that you want to design, you want to develop, you want to construct, you want to fabricate, all those key terms, and for the betterment of the nation, the user, and industry, so on and so forth. Okay, so normally you'll see that you start from fundamental, and then you go to apply. From apply, you start going to prototype, and then technology transfer, and so on, product and commercialization. Overall, wherever you go, the ultimate aim for any research is also to basically go on, if possible, commercialization. I'm not saying all, because some is just purely knowledge, but like basically those under the science, or non-science as well. Sometimes if drafting policies, guidelines and all that for government, basically that these are the things that you maybe can commercialize as well under consultation or under product. Okay, so our target here today, our proposal writing, we're going to look at least two part of this. Basically, if you were to be writing for a fundamental grant or fundamental proposal based on your research, what is the way for you to write it? What are the keywords for you to use? If you're going for applied research, what are the keywords you're going to use, and so on. This is what we're going to look here today. All right. Yep, so basically this is just a repetition of that. Basically, we see here, if some of you all don't know what is fundamental research, these are basic, pure, expands existing scientific knowledge. It is more on theoretical and exploratory in nature, no direct or immediate commercial benefit. That means when you do this research, you don't expect this research to produce a tangible product. Okay, you want this to be something that can be utilized for applied research. Okay, it is a research based on curiosity, foundation of commercialization and applied research. Before you go for apply, this is the grant that you want to look forward. This particular fundamental research answers the why and the how. Here is where you incorporate new theories, concept, ideas, structure, processes, and so on. So this is fundamental. And then go to apply. Apply, like the word says, you're going to apply those products to solve particular problems or provide innovation solution. It has to have some practicality in it, descriptive in nature, a follow-up research to further investigate the finding of basic research. Okay, these are the two important part of research. At least for your, if some, most of you all are in your masters and your PhD, you should basically focus either one. And my emphasis is that in order for you to do research, though at the end of the day you want to go and do apply, you should always start with the fundamental research first before you go for apply, because you cannot straight away in research go straight to apply before doing those fundamental research. Okay, so that's the way for you to go, at least for postgraduate students. Okay. So basically, what is the goal of a research proposal? Yes, we need to know now, when you start writing for a proposal, what is your intention? All right. Your intention is that in a research proposal, the goal is to present the author's plan, with the authors being yourself, for the research you intend to conduct. All right. In some cases, part of the goal is to secure funding for research. In others, to have the research approved by authors, supervisors, and departments so that they can move forward with it. And lastly, a research proposal is required as part of the graduate school application. Like I mentioned earlier, postgraduate students, you are definitely required to draft a research proposal. You are definitely required to present, or we use the term defend, your research proposal, so that after getting the green light from the proposal defense committee, you can actually continue to pursue the data collection and also focus on the methodology that the proposal defense committee have endorsed. Okay, so that being said, you can only start your research and also methodology, or whatever methods you're going to employ to the research, after you obtain the approval from the proposal defense committee. So please be aware not to go ahead of yourself and start doing research, start distributing questionnaires and all that without getting the endorsement from the proposal defense committee. Main reason is because if the committee, the proposal defense committee, do not see the scope of your research is at the level of degree attempted. For example, you are a PhD student, your proposal is in a way where it is at the level of masters. So maybe the committee would not agree that this project is at the level of a PhD. So then they will give you some comments for you to maybe expand your scope, you know. On the other side, on the other end is basically, maybe as a PhD student or maybe as a master student, your proposal have been written in a way where your scope is so high, so huge, that proposal defense committee thinks that, hey, you are actually doing a master project. Why is your proposal like a PhD proposal? So please narrow down your scope. So that can happen. That can happen. We have cases also that our own student, when during the proposal defense, when the student was presenting, the panel basically commented that your research proposal the scope is too huge for a PhD also. It looks like you're doing very much, a lot of things you are doing. So they recommend to reduce the scope so that the focus of the PhD can be narrowed down and the objective can be fulfilled. And most important, the student can graduate or can complete the research on time. Okay, so that's the importance of a proposal defense committee, at least so that you know what you are doing has some merits, has some level of the degree that you are attempting now. Okay, so that is the goal of your research proposal. Okay, in continuation, in a research proposal, the authors demonstrate how and why their research is relevant to their field. All right. So basically here, right, you're going to demonstrate that your work is necessary for the following. Most important thing, you see 2A, I always emphasize on student to first find a gap. Okay, I will go to the gap part later. Filling a gap in the existing body of research of their subject. Your research should be in a way, when you start presenting to people, when you start submitting your proposal, that proposal, when the readers are reading, they should be seeing that you are basically clear on A, clear on B, and you have identified that something in the middle that can correlate between both, or basically there's something contradicting between both, whereby that's where you start to come in. All right. So that's why they say gap, because this is A, this is B. Your phase here is that you are filling the gap. Okay. Basically, you have find based on literature review, literature search, that you got a question mark, and then you between subject A and subject B or many other subjects, that now your research is trying to address those particular gaps. Okay, so proposals should go on that particular focus. Apart from that is uh, not necessarily all research goes on filling the gap. Maybe your research can be improving certain existing research on a subject. Like what I said is that sometimes at this stage, some of you all may be reading other researchers' master thesis and PhD thesis. Notice that always at the end of the thesis, during the conclusion part, you will have something called a future recommendation. Every researchers will basically have that in their thesis. And maybe you feel that you want to pick up those particular recommendation and try to employ that in your research, try to do that in your research. So if you now, currently you are still in the ideation stage, maybe you don't know what to do. My suggestion is to always go and look at thesis. There's a lot of theses available in net and Google Scholars and so on. You can download them. You can see if the focus is something that you are doing. Try to look at their future recommendation and see whether you can start to do that for your own research or not. So at least you have their thesis as the base, and you are now doing the research to refer back to that and try to improve your research by fulfilling their future recommendation. Okay, so that is A and B. C is something, in my opinion, is if you can do that, it'll be very good. But normally, the new part of a research will always comes when you start, you are in a certain level. For example, why I'm saying this is because student, right, postgraduate student, what you tend to do is that maybe two things: you have an idea already, or you are actually doing project that your supervisor is actually giving you, or some of you all maybe working as a graduate research assistant. Basically, your proposal is just the grant proposal that your supervisor has submitted and obtained a grant, and you are doing the research. So there's an element of basically there are certain knowledge that has been given to you in the form of a proposal, and you are now going on applied basic. You are just employing whatever methodology given by the supervisor's proposal to do your research. But when you are in the stage of maybe an academician or a scientist, where you perhaps would have a new idea, then this is where these kinds of research you can go, like adding new original knowledge to an academic community, existing understanding on the subject. So this is also, when you have C, it is always good that you start applying for funding. This is my personal opinion. Of course, you need to have some funding for you to start research, especially when you have something like a light bulb moment or new knowledge gained from existing literatures and all that. These are the things that you will normally do. So A, B, and C is basically a scope of anybody's research. You will either filling a gap, you are either improving from other people's research, or if it's a really new one, then you embark on a novel research. But there are a lot of contradicting statements on this, and because a lot of scientists and also researchers will normally say that nothing is new. Almost even every theory, even every paper published with a new theory has their references or have their references. So that being said is that always or any new research will definitely come from existing research, and they will try to improve or contradict or try to support them by experimental research and so on. Okay, so again, this is always depending on how the scientists also researchers thinks. But anyhow, you won't go away from this A, B, and C. Okay. So your research proposal also has to cover these things. This is just generally speaking. The research methodology that you plan, very important. Even after you get your idea and all that, you need to distinguish, or you need to determine what kinds of methodology that you're going to employ in your research. Definitely, in order for you to know what methodology you're going to apply, you need to read how many types of methodologies are there in the first place. So this is definitely going in the stage of literature search, then goes to literature review, and then when you start to narrow down that you're going to employ certain methods from other researcher to your project. All right. So B, the tools and procedure you will use to collect, analyze, and interpret your data, the data that you collect. So what does it mean by tools? What does it mean by procedures? So those in under social science, you will definitely know that tools can be maybe the mode of how you collect your data. It can be in survey questionnaire. It can be basically, maybe a close interview session. These are all procedures lah. And then maybe what are the softwares that you're going to use, like SPSS. Maybe you're going to use Smart PLS, or some of you all are very good in programming. Maybe you want to use Python programming to do, maybe certain analysis using PLS and so on and so forth. Okay, so then C, one thing you need to also cover is explanation of how your research fits the budget and other constraints that come with conducting it through institution, department, or academic program. This C is where, like I mentioned, what is the focus of your proposal? As postgraduate students now, your focus should be to make sure that your research work in your postgraduate study has been really narrowed down. The scope has really is clear. Your objective is clear. Your expected outcome is clear. And what you intend to improve or also basically prove that your particular research can help your department, institution, the nation, organization, or certain focus. I will go in depth into that when we look at the actual writing of the proposals. All right. So when I mention C, right, part of it, or mostly when I see, right, we have a lot of countries who actually align their focus, their objective to the SDGs. Okay, because a lot of countries have signed treaties saying that they are pledging themselves to basically all those SDGs here. All right, like if you see in Malaysia, we have added one which is called as societal harmony and happiness, and plus with this. So even in Malaysia also, we have a lot of policies, guidelines, and so on. For example, we have something called a MySTIE from MUSTI, and then we have this, what do you call that? Shared Prosperity Vision for Malaysia to replace the previous vision, which is the Vision 2020. So now we have the Shared Prosperity Vision 2030. And of course, there are a lot of items. Why is this important? This is for postgraduate students and also for lecturers that is here writing research proposal. It is very important that you narrow your scope of research to focus on these things. Reason being because we look at the side of funders. Okay, research funding organization, like for example, like I said, Ministry of Education, they don't really focus on anything else except for the objective or also their visions and missions of the institution. Every institution have visions and mission. Ministry of Higher Education have their focus. And if grant applicants like us, we apply something not focusing or not targeting on their aspiration or their policies, if it's interesting, it will be considered, but normally it will be put aside because they want to focus on those people who is actually focusing on their mission and vision. Okay, that is for grant providers. For postgraduate students, especially Malaysian postgraduate students, it is very important that your research follow SDG. This is also outlined in the Malaysian qualification framework by MQA, that the student in the at least in their postgraduate standard of Malaysia, you need to incorporate some of this in your research project. It's a must. It's a must. So if you are in the if your research is focusing in either one or two research, and that research can actually improve part of the goal here, then this is something that your proposal defense committee will want to consider. Another hint is that this is something that your examiners, your proposal defense committee or your proposal defense examiner will definitely question you. For example, you are very happy with your project, a lot of things has been determined, your objective is clear, everything is clear. Then when the panel throw a question, from your research, what are you trying to tackle? Which part of the SDGs you're trying to tackle? And then you stand still, like you don't know, actually you haven't focused on this. Then that will be a problem because the core of the Malaysian research ecosystem or the postgraduate studies go on student trying to address this. So from this, you can see, like in terms of Malaysian, they're trying to focus whatever research, whatever grant apply. We have to make sure that we go to the Malaysian, whatever Malaysian government aspire, okay? That is in your research. And for grant also, it's not different. It's the same thing. If your grant is focusing on Malaysian policies and all that, and at the end of the day, it's also focusing on SDG, then there's highly chance that they will actually filter yours to be in a tray where for them to then start giving it to the reviewers, because there are stages of how proposal come on their table, which one the officers will basically filter, and then which one they do not want to focus and which one they will want to focus. Same thing in masters also. When you go for proposal defense, examiner will say, is your research useful or is your research not useful for what the context of a nation, for example, is not focusing on that. Okay, so these are very, very key points that you should focus when writing your proposal. At the end of the day, addressing this is one of your key importance, I should say. Okay. All right. So how long should a research proposal be? I'm sure a lot of students will normally ask this, especially when I'm teaching research method. Students tend to ask how many pages, how many pages to write research proposal, as if when you reach that page number, you are in the range of A, B, C, D, or so on. I would like to say here that they are less emphasis on page number for a proposal, but definitely you wouldn't want to write a thesis length of a proposal, because by definition a proposal is still an idea that you want to submit to grant holders or examiners for them to the faster they read, they can understand them. All right. So generally, research proposal for maybe a bachelor's or a master's thesis are a few pages long, maybe less than 30 pages. Research proposal for bigger projects like PhDs and also for grants. Okay, sometimes they are longer, and the requirement it has to be detailed as possible, because as compared to master and also bachelor, the level of outcome that is expected from a PhD student or a research funder or research grant applicant, they are different. So you have to be as detailed as possible. All right. So your research proposal goal is to basically clearly outline exactly what your research will try to accomplish. So please include, maybe information like I mentioned before, your SDGs, your policies, and all that. So normally this word count and page count nearly isn't as important as compared to ensure that all the necessary element in a proposal is there. If those particular things your proposals are basically subjective, they cannot really grasp your concept. They cannot basically understand what you're trying to say. So even how much you write, it is still, it does not fulfill their requirement. Okay. All right. So now we go for our research proposal structure. So this one will be quite lengthy. I will try to explain as much as possible. We will have some activities here to identify basically what it needs to write perhaps a good proposal. Okay. And it's not hard, it's not hard because there is definitely a template. All of y'all, the postgraduate students here, would have received, even before you apply the postgraduate program in UOW, when the marketing staff hand you the application form, they also gave you a separate document called a proposal template. Okay, that proposal template basically outlines whatever we are going to talk here. This is very, very important at the early stage, for at least for your application stage, for the department, at least for my department, the Postgraduate and Research Center, for us to identify who are the suitable experts that can actually guide you in your research. You know, who are the person that is at least at the field of research that you wanted to do, because you would have submitted your research proposal, and when you submitted that, you have determined this is what I wanted to do, and please, you are actually telling, please help me find the expert in the particular area. So from the postgraduate and research center perspective, we look at the proposal, we send to the head of department, we ask the head, please let us know who is the expert in your department to supervise the student. Okay, so when we assign you with supervisors, they are basically the expert in, or so-called, not too much into niche of the topic, an overview of that particular topic, they should be an expert in to guide you at least. Okay, so a research proposal follows a fairly straightforward structure. Okay, so in order to achieve the goal described in all those things that I mentioned previously, nearly all research proposals include the following section. So notice that I have highlighted, or basically, number 8, budget. It's in red color. Why I'm putting it in red color is basically because normally for a postgraduate proposal, you will not see budget appearing there. Budget will normally appear in grant applications. So because, of course, that's the reason you are writing a proposal, because you want to acquire, you want to receive a grant, a sum of money to conduct research. Okay, so and also because our title here, we're going to focus on many different kinds of writers or proposal, right? So that's why we incorporate this as well. So at least even as a student, while you're looking at proposal writing, you also have knowledge on budgeting, which is also good if in the future you are looking to manage a department or being an academician, applying for research grant, being a scientist and so on. Budget is the most important thing that you need to look at even after you write a very beautiful proposal. Okay, so we start off with a simple what you call this exercise later on. The first part is basically your title. All of you all would have title now, but trust me, almost 98% of postgraduate students will end up with a different title when they submit their thesis. Okay, what you would have submit now would definitely be just an overview to help us identify supervisor for you. But the actual title that you need to write has, have to contain these elements lah. Okay, I would always you know the why and the how part of it. I would also emphasize on something we call as a what. Okay, so the what question is basically the center point of every project, which is the goals or goals lah. All right. The quick question here in what is that, what is the project team trying to achieve? What are you trying to achieve? That's what. Are you creating new product or service? Are you modifying existing product or service? When you implement the project, how will your organization be in a better position to meet the strategic objective if you're looking in corporate side? Okay, so that is the what part. Okay, the powerful why question is the next is here, right? You ask the question, why are you undertaking this project? Okay, because the question of what have an answer, the question of why have an answer, and the question of how have an answer also. So these are the things that you're going to put in write-up. But even in your title, at least for the for grant applicants, you need to make sure that all those are there, so that when the panel is reading the proposal, before reading the proposal, they look at the title, they can basically understand what the applicant is trying to achieve. All right. So you have that what, why, and how. This is the why part is more of the emotional element of the project. Okay. So is talking about you can tell the members what to do every day, but until they understand why you are doing this, even your team members won't know. So the why element is very important in research also. You can tell the panel what is the problem in the world now today, but at the end of the day, if you cannot convince the panel why, even after you addressing all the problem, what is your research and why you're doing this is not being mentioned, then your grant loses certain element of importance there. Or at least your proposal, the panel will definitely uh, fry you and ask you, so okay, you identify all the problem of the world, but what you want to do, why are you doing this? These kinds of things you need to be addressed. And then finally, the how question. Even though you know the what, you know the why you're doing this, you also need to identify how you're going to do this. Okay. You know what you're trying to do, and also maybe you will basically uh, address that why part. You will also now look at how will you complete your work. In simple terms, we are determining who will do what and what each task will be completed. Okay, so those are the proposal. So in title, for example, we look at this title 1, 2, and 3 here. Okay, I want to give you all a task lah. Okay, so basically, scan your phone here in this QR code. So there's a title at the side of this. I want you all to identify based on the title, the what, the why, and the how element. Okay, you can do like this. You choose number one, what, write down which of these part. Maybe the what is biological and electrical properties. So that is the what. And then the why. So when you talk why, I ask you, why are you doing this? You say, I'm doing this for. So there's a term for there in the title. So you highlight those things. And then you choose why part of the title. So these three, right, is basically a fundamental research title. They are actually a research grant title, which has all these elements. So I want y'all, maybe we take around 5 to maybe 7 minutes. Please, all of y'all, scan this and choose. So what you're seeing now, and just write down what, why, and how. Okay, we can start now. Another one thing is that I'm not asking for you to define this. It's just based on what you see, you can know which is the what, which is the why, which is the how. And also please label like the number one, number two, number three, so that at least you can identify uh, all three of the title, the what, the why, and the how. I'm just having two. Uh, there's two, only two answered here. I see a lot of y'all are good. That means most of y'all are, I think almost every one of y'all are correct. Lah. Yes, good, good. Yeah, good. Any more answers? Maybe I give another 1 minute. If you have any answers, then we can continue. Okay, so basically, we see here, let me bring this first. So we have of most of y'all are doing three, and then like this we do number one lah. Okay, we see for this part. The what is biological and electrical properties, correct? The why. So now you know, right? When you have why, your title must have for who, for what, for, and then the for is the key point here. For what? So my suggestion here, right? In your proposal, right? If you're going to have for, that for should be something addressing all those key policies and the national agenda, the SDGs, and so on. All right. you don't go into directly quoting that SDG. You go into the area where the SDG look like. For example, in Malaysia, we have the category of the capacity, or you call that an income status of the people. We categorize them by B40, M40, and T20. So whenever we talk about B40, there is a policy in Malaysia for us to make sure that we can do research so that it will be helpful for those people under the B40 category. Basically, it means on the lower income category. So if we are putting those keywords inside there, then the panel, when they look at it, they can understand that your research is now, whatever you do, you're going to focus on that B40 category. So that 4 is very important in a research title. Okay, that's why it's whenever when you submit your PhD titles, and sometimes you can see PhD titles are quite long also. Right? While I don't encourage that too long title, but you have to make sure this criteria is definitely in the research title, at least even for grant title as well. Later on, I will also show you, in order for you to apply for fundamental, what kind of title you should add. In order for you to apply for applied research, what kind of title you should basically put it in. All right. So basically, all of y'all here are correct, kind of correct also. Let us look at the answer here. All right. So we have 3 titles, and these are fundamental research titles. So this fundamental research title, right, you will understand that none of these particular keywords, right, sounds like they are creating something. They do not use the word like construction. They do not use the word like what do you call this, fabrication. They do not use the word of development. You know, these kinds of keywords. And also always remember, it also goes on disciplines. Like maybe if you talk about computing, developing is something quite common because they develop an algorithm. So developing is something in computer science term, it is fundamental. But whenever you do that in engineering, then there's something wrong in the title because you are not catering to fundamental, but basically you are now doing something to develop things. So development is depending on on disciplines as well. Okay, so here is basically the color coded declaration here. For example, when you ask the question, what are you doing? So the answer is, I'm doing biological and electrical properties study. Okay, why are you doing this? The reason I'm doing this is for age-related cancer diagnosis, screening, and prevention. Or how are you doing this? I'm doing this research by using the in-house fabricated dielectric nanogap capacitor biosensor. So you see, when you yourself ask the question, you can basically write a title already. So these 3 question is very important throughout your research also, but at least because when you start with the title, these 3 things is important. Next, we look at number 2. Number 2, right, you have 2 things there. The what and the how sometimes comes together. Because what are you doing? What kind of project are you doing? Definitely, you're saying that I'm just preparing the inorganic nanostructure for biomolecule, hybridization. But also you see there is surface modification, which kind of like the methodology. Surface modification is a methodology in a way. But then the why you're doing it is quite clear, because whatever experiment you're doing, you're going for label-free halal product detection kit. So in Malaysia, the halal research is quite prominent. A lot of people is doing research on this. And whenever you choose that particular keyword in your title, I'm not saying that those things you should be manipulating. I'm just saying that if your research is on halal, please put those particular things plus keyword in your title. It's very, very important. And number 3, the what? Amending phosphate fertilizer with that. And then how you're doing this? Using activated carbon, humic acid, and xylotide. For what? To improve phosphorus use of efficiency in acid folate. So these 3 things are fundamental title. Now, let me bring you to the applied research. You have these 2 things. You don't need to basically answer this in your Padlet. I'll just show it to you. This is applied research. When you look at applied research, notice the first few few words. Fabrication, characterization. Fabrication, characterization. when they talk about that, right, it shows that there is an action verb of trying to do something. And those action verbs are basically mostly like you're constructing, you're building, you're also developing, you're experimenting, and all those kinds of things. So in here also, you can actually distinguish or differentiate the what, why, and how as well. So for example, here you see fabrication and characteristic of xenonic wire gas is actually the what, why you are doing this for agarwood oil grading. That means to classify the agarwood oil. But how are you doing this? I'm using sol gel method. So three things is already inside the title. Second, the green color is basically the what, the how is patterning the lithography, and also the why are you doing this for DNA chip application. So three things that keep in mind. These are very important in your entire research actually. But your title part, this is a key points for you to remember. Okay, so these are all the titles as well. You see here, right? Basically, this one I extracted from all information that I can get. For example, we have all these are fundamental title, but then notice number one, developing. Oh, so then those people in the engineering discipline, whenever they see the word here, they'll feel, oh, it's applied and all that. But then remember, what are they developing? Developing blah 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 model. So model is basically fundamental. Under fundamental, it goes on. If you're gonna develop just a model, so they go under fundamental research. So they basically you need to read the entire thing. So developing e-millennialpreneur 4.0 education model towards Muslim youth SME success. Notice even one thing. They only got the why and only they got the what, but they don't have the how are you doing this. Methodology is not included there. Okay, but that being said, I'm not saying that sometimes some title won't have that also, but it might not have that. But my key point is you must have that. Okay, and then model, this is in Bahasa, like maybe some of y'all don't understand. Developing a new strategic cybersecurity model. You see all these module, developing evaluation of health education module, just like a manual, developing a practical entrepreneurship model. So these are all fundamental based research when you use model and all that. A framework, so developing a framework is also fundamental. Creating new research development strategy model. So these are all the what part of the research. From this title by itself, right, grant holders or proposal defense committee or examination committee panel, they can basically understand what you're trying to do. And it's very important for you to, like I said, you have a basket of KIV, you have one basket for further process, at least for grant application. So sometimes people will just put that in the basket where to further process, and some things like quite in a big question mark will be kept in the KIV basket. So for grant writers, make sure at least at this stage you have done with the project. Okay, all right. So that is on title. So normally in a proposal, after the title, you will definitely have one thing you call as executive summary. So executive summary is very important also because executive summary is something where the position is at the very top or the first to read, but it is the last to write. Okay, that means after you have determined all your research, what you're trying to do, what's your research gap, what's your methodology, what's your expected output, what is your vision, mission, and all these kinds of things, then only you will start to summarize your entire proposal into something you call as a executive summary. But the positioning of this executive summary will normally be at the top. Reason being because you know why? Because when we talk about in the perspective of grant applicants and also grant reviewers or research funding reviewers, before they give you the money, we have to understand that on their desk, right, they're going to have huge numbers of proposal, and they do not have time to read each and every document submitted to them, at least for the particular period of time given to them. So the most important part they will want to see is executive summary. They want to really see, in fact, if you talk about grant reviewers, they are going on the impression or in the mentality to reject most of the grant so that they can actually get the cream out of the majority. So they don't want to waste their time to read on something which is not focused on perhaps fundamental or applied. If it's a fundamental based research grant, but then you write an applied based proposal, that is straight going to the rubbish bin. If this is purely on applied based research and you are just writing on fundamental, that is going to the rubbish bin. Okay, so they do not have time to really go and read every piece of it. So this helps them. Okay, so then now in executive summary or abstract in that case, what is the most important, what is the important criteria you have then? I have brought to you, this is my FRGS 2021 application, whereby together with a colleague, ex-colleague here, we've written a research proposal, submitted, and we have obtained a research grant. If you look at the guideline in the research website for us to apply, you look at the top here under the, because I've extracted this directly from the grant website, you see what they mentioned here. Please include the problem statement, objective, research methodology, expected output, outcomes, implication, and significance of the output from the research project. So they have already given you a guideline. What do you need to write as an executive summary? So this is what we have written. All right. From a layman's, I mean, from your eyes, you just say this is just one statement. But then I can narrow down, I can or basically do a segregation on each of the wording to describe this particular research. So if you see here, this particular executive summary, we pick, for example, the first sentence, we just give a basic introduction. For example, vector control is very important in global strategy for management of mosquito-borne diseases, and insecticide application is the most crucial component in this effort. Just one line of introduction. Then straight away, we go for problem statement already. The second sentence is a problem. However, so when I start doing however, we are trying to indicate the problem. Insecticide application is facing challenges due to the development of resistance in vector mosquitoes, and usually a proper resistance surveillance program is crucial for resistance management strategies. What we are trying to say here. Of course, there's a lot of pesticide nowadays available, but nowadays the problem is that the tolerance level of a certain insect towards certain pesticide. Nowadays, even though how strong the pesticide is, the insect basically develop a resistance towards those particular pesticide. So a problem has been indicated there. Currently, okay, so the first stage is a problem that we mentioned. Now, then we go on the worldly problem. Currently, the resistant surveillance program relies heavily on diagnosis doses established by the World Health Organization, WHO, which our program relies heavily on diagnosis doses established by which are less sensitive to the lethal response from the specimen and inconsistent regards to the region. Which is just talking about problem statement. Then what do they want? They want objective. So we don't really list down the report-based objective here. We go on the overall aim of the project. So here we are saying we propose a novel technique that able to diagnose the resistance level and classify the group of insecticide that is resistance by the mosquito. Some people go into writing down their objective also, but putting it in the sentence form. No issues in that, but always remember, this abstract normally written in a publications or report and all that has the number of wordings there. Sometimes it goes on like 300 words, sometimes it goes more, sometimes it goes less. So you cannot be putting all the words inside here. You have to really go on the aim of the objective. So that is objective. Then after stating the objective, we also propose the research methodology. We go right away following their stages. The proposed technique involved the development of a model that is using machine learning algorithm. So methodology has already been employed here on the pattern composition of all this, blah, 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 blah. That is on the machine learning side. Then we go on the, what do you call this pesticide side, which is using HPLC method and so on and so forth. Okay, then there is few lines. After that, we go on expected outcome. we expect to understand the contrast of all these things between susceptible and resistant mosquitoes in order to understand their differences in metabolic response and insecticide. So the output from those research, we have already indicated that. And then finally, what is the significant output of the project? The technique is expected to assist in providing more rapid and accurate result of the susceptibility status of the mosquito in resistance surveillance program. Okay, so this is significant of the output. Some of y'all, I might also suggest the last sentence you put in, what is the ultimate goal of the country in this particular region. You can also put this research tends to address the SDG number 1 in order for us to fulfill the subsection in SDG, which is to curb poverty and blah blah blah. So when you start putting that in, right, the entire abstract goes into the list of review, because you have captured all those elements that is actually important for a grant. Or as a PhD holder, when you have already, as a PhD student, you have already addressed your scope of research in this in this one paragraph statement here. You see, so these are color coded accordingly, and you can follow the same step. So basically, you do not need to think what do you need to write. Whatever things has been given to you, write accordingly, and then later on I will show you how to write a proposal. There are stages also. I will show you that. Let us just go forward on the content of proposal first. All right. So after you do that, then definitely you'll go on introduction. Okay. So many, what do you call this? When you talk about introduction, some of us will normally put in the historical information. We will introduce the topic. You will also, at least in a research paper, your objective, problem statement, everything will go under the introduction section. But for a thesis, at least for a proposal defense report, you will separate that into several subsections like introduction. Maybe you put it as a background of the study. Then you will have a problem statement. Then you will have maybe a hypothesis, or maybe you'll have a research question. Then you go to objective. All those is according to the template given to you and according to the focus. If you're applying for grant, they come in different template. If you're applying, writing a proposal, it goes on different template and so on. But overall, these are the content that should be there. Okay. And then number 3, it provides the context of your research. All right. So in a research proposal, an introduction can be just few paragraph long. It should be concise. That's the most one, because it's quite limited. So it should be concise. All right. But don't feel like you need to cram all of your information in one paragraph. In some cases, right, maybe you need to, explain a little bit about the introduction part. Remember in the abstract that we have extracted those information. Maybe you want to explain about a historical event that comes to your reason for doing this research. Okay. So those are the things that is very important in introduction. And then, also some, if it's not about introduction, then some maybe we putting it into background of significant. So this is where you explain the why of your research. Why your research is necessary and how is it related to establish your research in your field. You might work, to complement existing research to strengthen your proposal. You can also challenge it. Okay, so this is the best part. You can bring in certain research and you start to challenge those research, because basically no matter how you work, you play with other people's research also, you will need to express in detail your research in this particular area. Okay, and then this is also the section where you clearly define your existing problem your research will try to address. By doing these kinds of things, you are explaining your work is necessary for that particular topic. Just to put things straight lah, okay, you want to answer your readers when they ask the question, when you put your problem, they ask the question, so what? So what is the problem? What are you trying to do? So this is the part where you need to address the importance or the depth of the problem that is being faced by certain community, certain society, people, industry, all those kinds of problems faced by them have to be clearly justified, at least in this particular area. Okay, your background significant. You will write also how you conduct your research in here. So because if you look at a publication, paper publication normally takes 10 to 16 pages, for example. There are more publication or journals that have more pages, but normally publication in journals, they normally go on lesser pages. So under the introduction section, you will basically cram all this into there. Okay, but not so for research grant and also for PhD proposal. All right. Okay, so after you have done with your basically background of that, now goes to the pain point. So this is your problem statement. Okay, so after you have identified your research problem for your project, the next step is for you to write your problem statement. Looking at the layout of it, like when you talk about introduction in a paper, you have all this in. But when you look in the thesis, you have this stated earlier before you have your literature review. But then, in order for you to come up with a problem statement, you need to at least have a review done or a literature search done already. Even though the section is in the second section of chapter 2, these have to be done earlier before problem statement can actually come out. All right. So when you talk about what is problem statement, so problem statement is a statement of current issue, problem that sometimes require now your action to improve the situation. Is there anyone voicing out something here? Anybody said something just now? I hear somebody saying something. No, eh? Okay, so I will just continue here. All right, so basically, this statement, it should be concise. So explains like what are the barriers in the current problem faced, maybe between certain function, certain process, product, in terms of applied, what is current, what is the problem in the current. I would like to give you all a hint. You do not need to find problem at least in the preliminary stages, right? If you are at the stage that you want to do research but you don't know what to do, the easiest way for you to find this issue is to reading your government's policy, your government's guideline, reading SDG also, because SDG basically address what the world is basically facing: poverty, clean energy, food security, national security, all these are issues. So when you are in the field of something that you can do everything, maybe you are an expert in quantitative method, that you think that I can do any research because whatever data given is all about me analyzing the data and proving certain hypotheses or creating null hypothesis, So if you think that you can do anything, and what is the current thing that you want to do, go for that. Go for those particular focus. So that when you start off with the SDGs or your government policy, your government's issues, it cannot be wrong, because all the grant providers that is under the ministry is working on trying to solve the national agenda. Okay, so these are the things that you can actually bring forward. And this statement is completely objective, at least in the problem statement. And you should focus on, the problem and leaving out subjective opinion. This is very important. You do not want to add something very subjective in problem statement. For example, the cost to implement the project in an industry is expensive. I'll find that a lot of, at least in the preliminary or early stages of proposal, students put in very general, expensive. When we talk about expensive here, then we question, what is expensive actually. For example, if I take 50,000 as an amount, 50,000 buying a car versus 50,000 buying a laptop. So the 50,000 range for purchasing a car is general, normal, but 50,000 buying a computer is expensive. So when we talk about expensive, right, we have to really be specific, as in what comes down to the term expensive. So that's why I say don't go on very subjective. You have to really be detailed, at least in problem statement. All right. So put the problem in context, what you already know, and then describe the precise issues that the research will address. What do you need to know? Show the relevance of the problem, set the objective of the research. So I will show you one example. So this is one example here. Let me see here. No, not example. This is basically problem statement have multiple purpose. So before we go for example, we need to address what is the purposes of a problem statement. All right. So problem statement, we need to, to identify and explain the problem, concise but detailed way to give the readers a comprehensive view of what's going on. Problem statement purpose is also to clarify what is the expected outcome. Another one thing you need to remember, some people always think problem statement is just putting in problem. They do not want to add in the solution in the problem statement because not many people will agree that problem statement section is only for you to say what's your problem. Why you really want to put solution in the problem? Not necessarily true. A lot of thesis, you will see that the problem statement comes with an explanation about the problem and then an explanation of how this problem can be dealt with in this research. Okay. My PhD project, I will show you the problem statement that I put there. I will put in the specifics of problem, and also I will address how am I going to tackle those particular problems. The reason being very simple. Like I said, when the readers reading and we look at practicality, your thesis in their hand, and then your thesis is already thick. So they want to see, people will want fast solution nowadays, I'll see. Even before information is available in slide number 78, the panel will already question that in slide number 22. Most of y'all will normally see that. And in your mind, you will think that I have already addressed that in my slide number, 78 or 79. But then the panel already come forward to ask you the solution because they are eager to see what have you come up. So some panels are like that. So when you've already indicated that at the earlier stage of your thesis or your grant, panel, I should say the panel emotion will be in a way contented. That means it's solved already. Sometimes panel want to read very fast. They say, I don't want to read everything. Please just write down and give me the solution. So you put problem statement, you put solution, for them, they already understand what you're trying to do. Then from there onwards, right, it's just for the panel or the examiners to see how to basically, start to judge you, to contradict your methodology and all that. Okay, so problem statement is very important. Problem statement have to be very specific, and it has to really be relating to something that is worthy, first for your PhD program, worthy for master program, worthy for grant providers to provide you with the funding, worthy for journals or certain publishers to actually accept your paper because they acknowledge this problem is something worth to be solved. Okay. So how to write a problem statement? Problem statement is a tool used to gain support and approval of the project from management and stakeholders. As such, it must be accurate and clearly written. There are few key elements in mind when drafting problem statement. That means when you write problem statement, you should describe how things should work before you go into the problem. Explain the problem and state why it matters. Some people go into the effort to make sure that whatever problem they mention, they link up with the national problem. So this problem is a problem because it has been identified by the nation. This problem is very important because it has been identified by the key national area or key strategic area of this organization. They try to bring in, some goes into an extent to cite in the problem statement also, which not many people try to encourage, but some people will want to encourage because trying to show that there are a lot of people claiming a problem as a problem is important. Okay. And also explain your problem in terms of financial clause. As I said, when you say expensive, declare those things are really expensive. Okay. But then another one thing, always need to remember, whatever problem you say in problem statement, the panel, the readers will expect that you are going to solve it. Remember that. Whatever problem that you mentioned in introduction side, maybe you are just giving an overview of problem. But when you've already reached to the topic called problem statement, everybody will expect you to solve it. The panel, readers, grant providers will expect you to solve it. So don't put things in problem statement where in your research, nowhere would you solve it. For example, when you talk about it being expensive, of course, everybody would know gold is expensive, but certain part of the gold is being used for conductive element. Okay, so what is your alternative? So you say, my alternative is I'm using copper to replace gold as an alternative for, higher electron transfer and so on and so forth. Good. But need to understand one thing, because you already put in the word expensive, you already put in the symbol of money there. You need to also justify in your thesis that how much that symbol is actually justifiable to state that now your solution is cheaper. So you talk apple to apple, money to money, and so on. So if you say expensive, proof in your research yours is cheap. If you say expensive, if you say it is longer, proof that in your experiment it is shorter. If you say this is heavy, proof in your experiment that it is lighter. So heavy, kg, proof in kg. Expensive, money, proof in financial. Longer in meters, proves that this is shorter. So you go on that particular, trying to address those things. So back up your claims, propose a solution, explain the benefit of your proposed solution, conclude by summarizing the problem and solution in problem statement. So I'm giving you all one example. So this is basically the objective from my own PhD, the problem statement of my own PhD. So I'm just going to read this out, and we're going to see that I've included problem and also solution. So just to give you an overview, this is more about trying to, replace certain materials from solar panel or solar cell into something which is more, acceptable by people or consumer and so on. So first problem statement, this is just extract from many problem statement I've indicated there. So here you see currently the use of anatase-based titanium oxide is frequent compared to rutile anatase based on crystalline material. So I already declared that what is the conventional use in titanium oxide. This is due to the difference in terms of energy band potential of anatase and rutile. I explained why it's being common. A larger maximum photovoltaic can be obtained on anatase than on rutile if the same redox mediator is employed. So now I'm implying that there is my indication of a suggestion that I'm giving. But however, rutile is more thermally stable than anatase. It is believed that through the mixed phase of anatase, see, all these that I mentioned from top before it goes to the it part is just trying to give you all an introductory of what I'm trying to say, what is the advantages, what is the disadvantages. Some problem has been given there, which is, however, rutile is more thermally stable than anatase. It is believed, so I'm proposing a solution in my one paragraph problem statement. It is believed that through the mixed phase of anatase and rutile at a desired composition, an interesting synergetic effect could occur as photocatalyst, which is the interest of this thesis. So this is one problem statement. So basically, from this problem statement, I'm going to draft my research question, I'm going to draft my objective, so on and so forth. Second problem statement. So since first stage of my PhD was actually to determine the synergetic effect between adding two different types of titanium oxide to achieve thermal stability. So that's one portion of my PhD. The next portion, which is the investigation of nature-based titanium oxide crystalline form mixture haven't really been elaborated in terms of electrode thickness and the effect of thicker electrode towards overall dye-sensitized solar cell electrical performance. Here, I'm just talking about basically what thickness of coating of a solar cell which constitute to better performance. That means we know what are the thickness. But now since I'm employing two different structure of material or titanium oxide, we need to determine what thickness gives an optimum electron generation around the solar panel, around the solar cell. Okay, so thicker electrode tends to have higher surface area, yet higher dynamic resistance. So one problem statement, which could obstruct electron movement and encourages recombination compared to thinner film. So it is important to find the balance between higher surface area and porosity on desired thickness, which could enhance the photoelectrochemical performance of the dye-sensitized solar cell. So what I'm trying to tell here, in layman terms, how thicker is better, okay? And is something called thick an issue or not? You know, so I'm going rail down to defining what defines as thick. It's not thick unless it's porous. You know, if it's porous, then it has higher absorption capacity. If it has higher absorption capacity, the recombination might be reduced. You know, so I go down to saying that even if it's thicker, I still need to investigate the porosity and also the surface structure of a material. So even stating certain thickness of in a micro level, I need to also go into looking at the porosity. So problem statement, you see, you have given the problem, you have indicated some amount of introduction or also issue, and then you suggest a solution there. So my readers, when reading my problem statement, they will basically know what I'm trying to do already. In first problem statement, they're going to know that this PhD student is going to use different structure of titanium dioxide to now test the difference between in terms of heat, in terms of other things and so on. So this is one example, okay? All right. So I hope you understand that in problem statement, lah, okay? Then now we go for the next topic, which is important in proposal also, which is the hypothesis. Okay, we need to know one thing. Most discipline, and not say most discipline, some discipline would not have hypothesis even in their thesis. If you talk about like me, experimental research, I won't have hypothesis in my proposal or in my thesis also. But you may see hypothesis is a key importance in social science-based research, at least in the business side and so on, because from here onwards, they're going to do a certain methodology to hypothesis testing to rather prove the hypothesis is null or basically proposing an alternative hypothesis and so on and so forth. Okay, so a hypothesis, what is a hypothesis? If some of you all may not know, hypothesis is something that I would say after reading a lot of literature, you have a hunch, you have a theory in yourself that you think you want to prove. So a hypothesis is basically a scientific method which requires one to test it out. Okay, or basically I should clear that lah. Scientific hypothesis is basically something that you understand a certain anomaly is happening based on certain phenomenon, and you think that certain things can be solved by using certain methodology. Okay, so scientists generally use scientific hypothesis and previous observation that normally cannot be satisfactorily explained without doing research. For example, we have this hypothesis. For example, let me think of one. Okay, like during the COVID time, a lot of parents will be saying that vitamin C can actually prevent COVID, or basically prevent common cold, or is it a myth or not? So you go on the hypothesis saying that basically vitamin C has the ability to cure or prevent common cold. So your maybe your hypothesis is that children who takes vitamin C is less likely to become ill during flu session, and that will going to become your alternative hypothesis. Maybe your null hypothesis is now children who take vitamin C are no less likely to become ill during flu session. So these two things is your hypothesis is there, and then you tend to do these two other things, and then basically from there onwards you'll do your significant level, you do your p-value, then you conclude based on that, and so on. So these are hypotheses. It's something that you base on facts also, that you can actually prove it to be either right, or maybe after doing experiment it's not right. One thing sneaky about this is that I do see student, if it doesn't follow the hypothesis, you have to make sure that they will make sure they change the hypothesis so that it follows the hypothesis. Meaning to say that if it doesn't follow the hypothesis, whatever it's a null hypothesis of an alternate, that becomes their hypothesis already. They will change that at the end of the thesis. So very sneaky. Some student play like that lah. All right, but that's how it goes lah. All right. So that is hypothesis. So formulation of hypothesis, for example, you have to make sure that this is very important. You don't assume certain thing out of the air. You make sure that you read the topic, familiarize yourself with it before making a final decision to call it as an hypothesis. Okay, so you need to make certain that the topic is researchable, at least in single discipline or interdisciplinary sense, meaning that it should have sufficient published material. Very problematic about certain hypotheses is that you do not read properly before you start to draft the hypothesis. But of course, this is where your supervisor comes in to help you to basically draft a hypothesis so that you are in the right track, that you can prove your hypothesis is either, following that or it's not. Okay. All right. All right, so when you go to hypothesis, then the next things you want to see is your, because you already drafted, you have your problem statement, you have got a hypothesis and all that. So next thing very important for you to have is research question. Research question is something, the question that always appears in your mind whenever you read certain thing. It will always go like how, why, what, don't go on where, okay? But you only go on how, what, why, and so on. It's just a question that you ask about your research, about why is this happening, how is this happening, and so on and so forth. So when you already have a problem statement, you will start drafting your research question based on your problem statement. Later, I will show you an example between problem statement and research objective. Research question and research objective. How do you relate them together? Okay. So before that, let us just look at this. A research question is a question around which centers in your research. It should be clear. You should be clear in your question. That means that all the items should be there in your research question. It should be focused, concise, complexity level also you need to see, because these questions, right, will determine the level of research that you're going to embark. For example, if you're a PhD research, this particular research, if you're a PhD student, your PhD research question should be in a way where panel can actually see the depth of your program, the depth of your project is actually in a PhD level. And also, it should be something that worthy for you to argue about. Okay? Let us look at one example. You see here, for example, the way to write now, the way to write. You see RQ1. RQ1 is going on how B40 spend their government cash transfer. Like for example, Malaysian give privileges for people to withdraw 10,000 from KWSP or the Employee Provident Fund. Then research now goes on basically to investigate, the objective of the research, to investigate the spending of B40 on the government grant, government cash transfer. Okay. But before the research objective, right, in your mind, you already must have this question. If government give money to all those category, B40, M40, T20, how would they actually spend their money? Okay, at least there's a research question that you will ask, right? From the research question, you're actually drafting now an objective. So when you have a research question, that will be very important for you to draft your research objective, because objective is now you embark on a journey to solve those questions that you asked before. You look at research question 2. Maybe you thought in your mind, how to develop practical mechanics for car rebates for cash transfer recipient. For example, going very specific on the mode of how B40 people maybe spend their money. Then your research objective to develop the mechanism for car rebates for cash transfer recipient. Notice, right, the statement between research question and research objective are the same. Just that one goes on the sentence of questioning, one goes on action verb. Okay, so there's a lot of things. So that being said, I'm going to show you another example. This is actually extracted from my FRJS 2021 grant together with a colleague. Our research objective, basically you have to go on the other way, right? Research question first. From research question, you draft your objective. Okay, you look at research question first. If you notice, right, the only difference between research question and objective now is I just include the word how would and then objective to study. How would the acrolein amino acid profile in susceptible mosquitoes different from the susceptible strain? That is my question. To answer that question, research objective number 1. To study the composition and pattern of acid amino, see same word. That second question I asked myself, how would the acrolein amino acid profile resistant mosquito vary with respect to the group? You look at the second objective, to study the composition. So it is directly related. Whenever you ask a research question, you then form them into becoming an objective. So that's how you do this. So the term here is very important, which is the front terms that you use. How, what, why, and so on. Repeat that certain terms. And then when you say how, you embark on a study. When you say why, you embark on an analysis. When you say what, you should go on analysis and also maybe to construct and all these kinds of things. So this question and answer game, you can really play properly in this particular way of writing your research question. So let me give you a color coordination also. So basically, this one sometimes different in different supervisor. Some supervisor goes in a way that if you have 4 research question, you should have 4 research objective. Some people say no, not necessary. You know, sometimes these kinds of things are not what do you call this, nailed to the, you know, to the wall or something like that. But these are format. When you talk about format, when we talk about writing, you want to have some benchmark writing. This is something that is acceptable, at least for grant. So at least for in our terms, it becomes a successful grant that we receive around 100 and something thousand Malaysian ringgit because we just follow the rules as such. Okay, so now we talk about research question. The next we're going on is the research objective. So how a research objective should be. Definitely when you go for research method class, your lecturer will be talking to you and saying that, you know, your research objective should follow SMART. You know, the SMART, what do you call this, indication. Later I'll show you what is SMART and all that. But then there are certain different kinds of people have different way of writing research objective in terms of the length. Some write it short, some write it long, you know, some write it a lot, you know, and so on. But anyhow, it should be clear and straightforward. Very important, do not make it too general. Do not make it general in the first place. Be specific. Every objective is something that you're going to embark to solve. So if that is so general, we question all the other part of the work done in the proposal. If your objective is very general, I would question the research question. I will question the problem statement. I will question your literature review and your introduction because this is general, not even specific. So very easy for me to know if it's a proposal, good proposal or bad proposal based on just reading the research objective. List the main objective. Basically start off with what are you going to do? You're going to investigate, you're going to fabricate, you're going to study, you're going to analyze, you're going to construct, all those key terms. Like for lecturers also, if you understand, these are the terms that normally we use in our in exams also, like using Bloom taxonomy. We have the level of Bloom, right? Like you have remember and then understanding and then analysis, applying analysis, after that what EC, evaluating, creating. So these are the level of research also sometimes, because when you go on creating, sometimes the creation part also can also take into account certain part fundamental also, because what are you creating? An algorithm, you designing something, so you can go on the higher order teaching, higher order, what do you call this, teaching or lower order thinking, sorry. All right. Number three, make sure it is realistic and achievable. The term within 2 years, sorry, because this one I extracted from the FRGS grant. So FRGS only allows 2 years. So for PhD, at least it should be achievable within your duration of your program. For master, 2 years. For PhD, 3 years. Not too many. Yes, this is also important. Some may be contradicting, some may not, but I would also agree that you do not have to have a lot of objective. Keep it short to at least maximum 4, minimum 3. That should be enough for a research-based proposal. If you have too many objectives, right, people will question how long do you take to solve all these objectives, even though it's written in a way where it's correlated with all of them. But in the panel eyes, examiner's eyes, it looks like your scope is too wide, too much you're doing. Okay, and definitely follow the SMART goal. SMART goes to specific, M is measurable, A is achievable, R is relevant, and T is time-based. Okay, I forgot to put a dot there. T is time-based. To put this into general, because we have all the discipline participant here in your field of research, to put things into general, for example, let's say my overall goal is to have overall aim is to lose weight and be in better health. So that's my overall health. So when I go for SMART, I cannot be using my overall goal as my specific, because losing weight has many pathways. You can just starve until you become thin, you lose weight. You can at least take a proper exercise, a proper diet to go thin. There's a lot of pathways. So you need to be specific. So the specific can be in a way where I will be focusing on a proper dieting plan. So you are talking about now the specific is, instead of looking into exercising, you're going on a dieting plan. So not exercise method, but more on your food habits. Maybe focusing on going to dietitian and all that. So that is a specific part at least. The measurable part, what you're talking about measurable. When you talk about measurable, these are all your parameters. For example, like I say, weight, height, length, basically, if you go on timely basis, so time series, you go on month and all that. And you really have to be specific on that also. For example, if I talk about this dieting, I'll say that my measurable is by December, I have to be reaching the weight of 60 kg, measurable. So kg there, December there is something which is specific. You're talking about a timeline there, and you're talking about losing weight, and you have estimated a certain kg there. Okay, so that is measurable. And then attainable. So we talk about the health thing also. How to attain these kinds of things. There's a lot of pathways, right? So basically to attain this, I would see a nutritionist, so that the nutritionist can design a eating plan for me. So that is achievable. So you see, specific, measurable, attainable. And then now we go on relevance. Okay, the relevance of it, for example, in order for me to have a healthy diet, in order for me to cure this, the relevance of it is when I reduce my weight, I could probably reduce my lower back pain. For example, I'm just throwing out this one at random now. To cure my back pain, so this will basically help. So the relevance of this is basically I can, the reason for me to opt to a healthy diet, because the relevance of it is that it might also solve my back pain. Okay, so I hope you can get it. And then timely. So timely, you just go on how time series work. In September, in October, I will start my diet regime in January. I will slowly reduce it by October. I will start walking more. By this holiday, I should be able to be at this particular size, all this kind of thing. So you see, I have given like certain example. and I put in all those key points there. And then some of you all might think, is this objective SMART should be in like S one objective, M one objective, R T objective? No, they should all be in one objective is possible because, like I said, your objective should be maybe four or three or four minimum. So having each of it in one objective, maybe not encouraged. Having all in one objective also is encouraged because uh, the pros of it is that when panel reads your objective, they know that you are detailed. The cons of it is that if you already promised the result earlier on, perhaps you may not have room to change at the end of the research if you don't really achieve the goal in your objective. So some people might say that don't really put the detail of the maybe a size into that, but put size into that. Don't say 30 kg, just say 20% of the weight, or just say focusing on size reduction, something like that. So when you go on size, you go on measurable already. So and your data are going to have size table, a weight table, all these kinds of things. All right, so that is for research objective. For example, so like I said earlier, uh, there are many kinds of, what should I say, uh, type of research. When we focus on fundamental, our objective by itself can declare whether the proposal itself is fundamental or applied. So use keywords such as to investigate, to understand, to analyze. If you notice these words here, right, they do not indicate I'm fabricating something. They do not indicate I'm cooking up something, I'm creating something. No, it just says that I'm going on a spree to gain knowledge, to develop a model, to draft a theory, to basically what do you call this? Do modeling or mathematical modeling to come up with an equation, new idea, these kinds of things. So choose those words if you are applying for fundamental research. But then if you are going on, or for example, let us see for other objective also. Yeah, so these are the applied one. Applied one, you look at the objective to design, fabricate, simulate, to design, fabricate, characterize, to design, fabricate, to develop portable dielectric, to detect, identify, and profile concentration level. So these are all going on, you are embarked on an action verb to do something, and this is an applied based research. So there are two kinds of research, and very important, you should focus. Uh, the rule of thumb is that you don't put two together. Don't put fundamental and apply together because research normally focus on kind of like one focus. Like if you're doing fundamental, it's fundamental, applied is applied. They don't want to jumble both together. Though even in applied, so even in applied, you will bring forward that fundamental research output, and you will tell in your proposal that the fundamental research output is the thing that you're going to do. You're going to design, you're going to construct into something applicable for a society or for somebody, for anybody. Okay, so that's how you should write your proposal accordingly. All right, so this, like I mentioned before, I'm not going to repeat here. Basically, all these are very key points. If you don't have this, uh, people may question because too general. If you have this, you can be confident in yourself that your objective is not general. It is it is specific. All right. Okay, then we go on literature review. So literature review. Okay, literature review, literature search. Can anyone tell me what's the difference? There's no Padlet. Can you write down in your chat? What's the difference? Can you write in your chat? Oh, I see here we are all muted by the host. Okay. In that case, can you all write down? What's the difference? Literature search, literature review. Nobody, or you do not have the privilege to write. Can you all write on the chat box or what? Ah, good. So can there are some writing. Yeah. Right. Here's the question. What's the difference between literature search and literature review? So Alicia, yeah, I think we can share to all our colleagues as well. So I have one reply here. Literature search, find all sources related to the topic, correct. Literature review, pick relevant specific information from literature search. Yes, it is somewhat rather true, but I will the point that you mentioned is the action that you're doing is correct. But when you have that in your report, it is something else that we need to do. SEO literature search is like go search engine and type all the keywords. Yes, layman's term, very good. Literature search for new relevant literature. Literature review, explain and compare. Okay. Yeah, I think Yokme is coming nearing to that also. There's no wrong in your answers, guys and girls. Basically, that's the truth. Literature search, it is just as simple as you type your keyword on Google and see Wikipedia comes out with the keywords that you have typed. You read through that, you think, this is good. You just copy, paste, and put it one side because you think this is something important for you. Okay, so that is a first step of every uh, before you draft your literature review. Okay, so you just gather information, like one of your friends was saying, gather information as much as you can to see whether you get the grasp of it, you understand of it. Okay, so that is literature search. Literature review, one of your friends was saying, which is very good also, is basically, I like this point, review, explain, and compare. Basically, what they say is that critically, now this is where the difference between search and review is that uh, your brain, okay? In your brain, this is where you're going to draft. When you start reading, doing a lot of search and all that, a light bulb moment will appear. When the light bulb moment appear is when you start asking question. For example, literature search A is saying that, like I said, the vitamin C, if you use vitamin C, can reduce cold. Literature B say there's no research about vitamin C curing vitamin C, so just declaring that by data and all that. So now, when you read two things, is contradicting what? So you already do a search and you get two different articles, and now when you want to do a review, that's where you start to critically read through, explain, try to see what literature A is trying to say, and then why literature B is contradicting what was the experiment done by literature B, what was the experiment done by literature A, and then why the results are different. And now you get a light bulb moment that you find out that this is something that you can do a review about. So we talk about literature A, literature B. How about if you have maybe 10 article in literature A supporting what literature A say, 10 article literature B supporting literature B say. So now you have a lot of a responder or a researcher based on your literature search having contradicting statement. You have yourself something we call as a research gap because there's no true understanding between both these two poles. That's where you start to come in. So when you start to come in, that's where literature review comes in. You start to review you start to critiques on other people's paper, you start to contradict their methodology, you start to say, basically trying to say they are no good by trying to be subtle. That's, don't quote me on that, not to say they're not good. You can also say that their research is not extensive enough to prove what they are proving. You can basically say that their methodology is something that you can, using your idea, you can improve. So here is where we talk about critically reviewing those literature. So literature review in your proposal shouldn't be literature search. That's why it'll be wrong for you to just copy and paste and put in your literature review. You see there's an image of a flowchart, copy and paste. All this is maybe 10%, but the other 90% should be more of you embarking on a journey to start to critique, to start to review, to start to explain certain things which other people cannot explain. And then inside literature review is also declaring how you would come into the picture. This is not many people know about literature review, because literature review is not literature search. This is where when you do literature review, you are basically, what do you call this, squeezing your brain to find out why these two things not same, and then you get yourself a research already. Okay, so in literature review, you will introduce all the source you plan to use in your research. It includes the landmark studies and their data, both scholarly activity and so on. Literature review isn't merely a list of sources. So this is the key point. That's what your bibliography is for. A literature review delves into the collection of sources you choose and explain how you're using them in your research. So a lot of things people also misguided on bibliography and references. In proposal also sometimes you can see bibliography, but the real term of bibliography is just that anything that you read, you put it there. But references is anything that you want to use to refer to what you're going to critique, you add it there. Although there's a two different thing. Bibliography goes more on literature search. You find everything, you paste it there, you want to make sure you are ethical, you make sure they are added into your bibliography. Also called nowadays, they say that is reference, but that is not true. Literature review is when you, whatever article that you want to bring that into the limelight, because you are saying this article is what I'm critiquing and why you're critiquing and what's your proposal, you add in there. Every aspect of your research, for example, like I show you, my aspect of my research was about the thickness of the coating, the types of the, the porosity of the material, and also the absorbent level of those particular material. So I need to find, critically review about, first, how many researchers basically use just one type of a powder to do their research, and as compared to other people use that. And now how am I going to merge them together? And then I'm going to start to put my own research into the picture. So that is your literature review. That is the reason why I want to tell you all. Literature review in a report or a proposal, you do not need to put so many, because it is weird. When you put literature review so many, it just sounds that you are just reading and putting there and saying that these are all the problems. But none of it you're trying to propose something to solve in your literature review, or you're not critiquing them, saying that their research is actually having a little bit of a flaw, or their research can be improved, or their research can actually help in creating another research. You can also say that by putting in your literature review. So you created a problem, you found a problem, and then you notice that you have a light bulb problem that you can solve it, and then the solution for it is obtained in another literature. You can actually add that in. So literature review should be something when you go from top to bottom, addressing how your research is going to be conducted, which is the reason why after literature review, you are now coming with a problem statement, because you have identified all the problems in those literature, then now you are going to try to solve it. So make sure you hold it to the core of the research. Don't confuse search, copy paste, just put reference, just put citation because you're ethical, don't want to say you're copy pasting. by the end of the day, you do not have any element of your own knowledge into those literature. So there's a lot of courses out there just focusing on literature review. Even there is 1 day training about literature. So PGRC also, we will try to organize just literature review based training, because we cannot really finish literature review in 1 day. They want actually have to have a lot of uh, thoughts put into that. Okay. All right. So that is literature review. Another one thing, okay, this is also important. Like writing literature review in a paper, writing literature review in a grant, writing literature review in a thesis and all that, they are different things. Writing literature review in a journal paper, for example, the paper is normally 10 to 16 pages, so you do not want to add too many images there. But writing literature review or background or whatever, sometimes for grant, right, it'll be very important for you to use image assistant, visualization. The main reason is because you yourself would know, even in my slide here, I'm condemning my own slide, too wordy. And some of y'all may be, this is my experiment, and my hypothesis says that your eyes get so tired if you look at so much of word, and then the very moment I put a slide with an image, your eyes straight go there. So that's one experiment that I was doing actually, because your eyes tend to go there because your eyes tired to see word. Same thing. I want to make sure I bring out the emotion out of you. Same thing when grant holders are reading proposal. If it's too wordy, it's tired for their eyes to actually see. So image assistant is very important for you to write grants and also thesis and all that. You can guide your internal examiners, you can guide your reviewers into image based. Okay, so what is this? I mean, some of y'all maybe don't know how to read in Bahasa. No problem. My indication of this slide, my reason for putting this image is just to show that it is a paper clipping. It is a paper clipping. Basically, you're putting it into a grant, saying that these are all the things that the national or the nation actually wants under their policy. So it's just something that instead of you writing it down, you have certain infographics here, which is easily for the eyes to see and read, and then you can basically from here describe this figure alone. Okay. Like this also, you see just an infographic showing a summary of what's a problem that is, there's an amount of money, which university, all these graph that can easily, 1 line or 2 line. If on top of this, you can indicate all those percentage for the viewers, they can just basically look at it and relate to what you write. And it's easy to the eyes, it is easily understandable and absorbed by the reviewers, by the examiners and so on. Okay, so image assistant is something for you to look upon before even putting it too wordy. Try to make sure this is, maybe you put it in the flowchart, maybe in you can put it in what you call this as a peta minda, a mind map. Okay, mind map and so on. Just not to bore the readers to read too much. Okay, so that is one point here. Later on in the methodology also, I will show you an infographic which is easily for you to do and do not need the people to really read so much, because an overview of the picture itself has an overview of the entire image. Okay, so under number 5, this is going under the topic of methodology already, because we have talked about introduction, we have talked about problem statement, talked about hypothesis, research question, we talked about research objective, we went to literature review. The next thing for you to do is that from your literature review, right, that's where problem, everything observed, you would have know what to do in your research, how to do this. So this is going under this topic here, which is research design, methods and scheduling. Okay, so in this section, right, in this topic, it's a must. The type of research you will try to do, you will try to word that, is it fundamental, is it applied, whether you're doing experimental, correlation, descriptive research, all these have to be really explained. In proposal, in thesis, you don't really need to explain because you would have done that in your proposal. In thesis, you can really have a section to just indicate what you're trying to do, but you don't really need to really explain so much of your methodology. In thesis, you're just going to tell them what are your how many you responded, what was the method done for you to streamline those respondents, so on and so forth. So even that is a different set of or different type of writing also. All right. So in proposal, B is very important. You need to let the panel know what research you are doing. Okay, that's very important. What data you are working on. So what data are we working on? It can be primary data, secondary data, it can be tertiary data also. So we have a mix of data also. All right. So if you are working on maybe purely on secondary data, basically just get databases data and you, for example, we have those people who are in computer science. The main research focus is on developing algorithms, their methodology of how their machine learning can be, able to achieve certain ROC value or, confusion matrix value, or you want to know whether the data is overfitting to the algorithm and so on and so forth. So for that particular purpose, this particular researcher do not need to do a collection of data because the focus is purely on data developing of algorithm to achieve certain accuracy. Okay, maybe that. But for people like social science, you need to really collect data. You don't really work with secondary data so much, but you try to work with secondary data to test your maybe methodology before you employ that in real to respondent. Okay, at least in the PhD research, like not so much in the master's one. Okay, and then D, what are the tools you use to collect your data? What types of questionnaire are you designing, and what softwares are you using? So all this is something that you really need to look at to basically indicate why all this will effectively try to solve or try to address the hypothesis that you're trying to propose here. Okay, so methodology wise, state it explicitly, give an overall summary of the research design and methodological approach. When I say summary, right, this is where your flowchart comes into place. A lot, not to say a lot of flowchart. If you have a flowchart at the start of your report, basically your proposal, before going to explaining so much into the parameters and so on, just do a simple flowchart there whereby when the panel look at your proposal, the first thing they can visualize is the flowchart. From the flowchart, right, they can really understand your project already. And they don't really need to read too much into the detailed part of the methodology. So visual, that in that particular part also, visual is very important. Provide methodology for each specific objective. What does it mean? Remember, whenever we do things, it has to be related. Research problem statement number 1, research question number 1, research objective number 1, all correlated. Then to address all of them, methodology number 1. So all of them correlated. So the panel or the examiners can know that the student is actually knowing what he's doing. He knows that he needs to achieve the objective. He knows that the objective was formed because he identified the problem and he has a research question. In order to fulfill the objective, he has a methodology for that. You see, easy, right? It's just one-to-one comparison. And you can actually draft your proposal to be one-to-one comparison also. Even though later on, maybe objective 1 and objective 2 may be having some correlation, but by then also, that is just on data and on result and discussion. You don't really need to do that, more on methodology part also. Okay, and then in what you need to describe, specific design. For example, we talk about engineering design. What is the parameter used for you to basically classify certain things? What was your, I should say, another one word is, instead of parameter, is that the benchmark, I should say, as a term that I forgot. What is the benchmark score that you need to achieve in order for you to say that your result is actually something reliable? You need to also calibrate your devices. So calibration method follow. You don't need to explain calibration method. You can also explain this calibration method follows what regulatory, like IEC 316, IEEE, or certain ISO standard. So by then, panel knows that you know your stuff. Okay, so these are the things you need to specify. You need to specify the materials and techniques that will be used in your methodology. what approach are you using? Like say you're using PLS method and you are using hypothesis testing. Like for example, those in computer science, you are using machine learning tactics, like maybe K nearest neighbor, you want to use SVM, many other kinds of algorithm you want to use, want to employ to analyze your data. These are the methodology, okay? And then use literature to support your design. Why is this important? Sometimes panel will ask you a question. I have went through a lot of examination where panel asks you, why are you using that method to solve this problem, where else there is an easier method for you to solve the issue. That's where sometimes students get scared, and they should be, because sometimes what happens is that if you are receiving a proposal from your supervisor and that proposal has already clearly telling you what methodology to use, what equipment to use, what algorithm to use, what software to use already. So you in your mindset, you wouldn't want to think that since my supervisor already gave me the guideline, I should follow. And supposedly when I do my examination, examiner won't ask the question. Wrong, because examiner will still question the fundamental. Examiner will question, or the grant review will question, why there's a lot of other method, why you use this method. The problem in this is that the student will say because it's a cheaper method. The students will say because the particular equipment is not available in the university, the software is not available in the university, that's why we resort to using this methodology, and so on. So before you go for examination, proposal defense, or also maybe presenting your grant output, get an information about why you are using certain methodology, why you are using certain devices, why you purchase certain material, and why you use certain techniques. So these are all the things that's very important. You need to what you call this, determine before going for any kinds of presentation or writing your report. So I want to show you another one, infographics. Not to say infographics, this is more of a flowchart. For those of you all who don't understand Bahasa, no problem. I'm just going to show you here is that what is stated in the left-hand side until right-hand side is entire project. The left-hand side here separates the row between first phase, second phase, third phase of the project. Then you will see the second column will be first level, second level, third level, fourth level, fifth level. Meaning to say what? The entire project is separated to three phases. In that three phase, each of the phase 1 and phase 2 has 2 levels. Phase 3 has 1 level. Then it really goes into going to the process that if phase 1 and phase 2 were to, what is the things that you're going to do? So you look at the green color and another one which is brown color. It just basically distinguishes or basically putting in objective. Green color 1, green color 2, and green color 3 in the rows that are all objective. And then in order for those objectives to be achieved, the methodology, which is the what do you call this? In orange color or brown color. So they determine the methodology. Like the first level of the methodology in the orange color is just literature review. Second is just interview. Third is interview for phase 2. And then data analysis. Then the last one is basically going on a different method of analysis. Then goes on the last part there, which is at the blue color, quantitative research. They just determine right there that by using all the data, by obtaining all the data from the orange and from the orange one, they are going to use quantitative method. And then what are the instruments they use? The method of getting this information is through interview session. And then when you do all that, objective, the last column is it will address objective 1. It will address objective 2. It will address objective 3. So as panel, hold on. As any panel, examination, grant, PhD master, this entire, this one table here, right, shows I am confident that you know what you're trying to do. Second thing, the level of research I can know here. If this is a PhD research, I can know that there's a lot of phases here, a lot of data, a lot of experiment being conducted, just to make sure first objective, second objective, and third objective is achieved. I can also know the flowchart of the entire project already. So if I have any question, I just have to look between phase one, second stage, what do you do for the qualitative research in the, third or fourth column there? These are all the questions that I'll just ask. So these are very, very interesting infographic or image assistant for you to write down in your grant. And you can also employ this in your, research proposal, and also in your thesis also, just to summarize, because thesis is not so thick. Whatever thesis that you see is thick is like only perhaps 60% of it is the content. The other 40% is just appendices only. So that's why the content is normally quite not much. Okay, so you have to be careful of the amount of wordings you use also. So having these kinds of thing is quite useful for you. Okay, so there's a lot of other assistants also, using table, using these kinds of infographics, image assistant, image assistant, or flowcharts, using flowcharts to just determine what are the stages of your research, these kinds of flowchart as well. All right. Okay, so that is about methodology. Okay, so we already talked about all those things. We went to methodology. So you might have a question. We are writing a proposal. So we are writing a proposal for a grant. Do we need methodology? Because we wouldn't know what to do also, because if you have declared all the methodology, wouldn't the panel say that you know so detailed, that means you already do the research? Not really, because panel would like you to be as specific as possible so that they can actually question the methodology. If you be very general, they will just go on a manner to wait and see what are the other contents that you will show. But if you be so specific, then they know, you know your thing. Okay, so that's what methodology is all about. And not necessarily by putting so detailed methodology, it will imply, or it will make the panel think that you already know what you're trying to do, so specific, meaning to suspect that maybe you do your project already before you submit to this particular grant body or so on. Not necessarily true. Okay, so that is methodology. The next we'll go for supposition and implication. Not many people heard of this word, but this is, in layman's term, is just preliminary result. Preliminary result to say that, because when you talk about proposal, right, normally it is a norm, you won't have result already. But sometimes not necessarily true, because some people would want to embark on the research, and before sending this research to certain grant body, they will want to do a pre-research or simulation to see an expected outcome, and based on that expected outcome, strongly suggest that in the methodology of the experimental or also hardware design, because they know that by using these kinds of design, after designing those particular things, then only they do another set of experiment to justify and compare between simulation and hardware. So some people might do that. Like for example, those under the material, they might want to measure using certain software on the strength of the material, or the heat transfer of the material, or the wear and tear of a material, just the design. So based on the preliminary methodology of using certain design, you would have obtained a result already. So that, but then that is not a real data, that is just a simulation data. Your research now is basically to now fabricate those things and then go forward for real data, those that can actually be applied for. All right. So what you call this as supposition is basically a belief held without proof of certain knowledge. It's just assumption and also hypothesis. I would say a proven hypothesis. You don't go just randomly throwing out hypotheses, but you have to make sure those hypotheses can be really validated. And at the end, the results should be favor to whatever hypothesis that you have mentioned. So although you can't know your research until you have actually done your work, you can actually be going into a project with clear idea of how your work will contribute in your field. Okay, so this section is also sometimes most critical in your research proposal argument, because it expresses exactly what your research is necessary. So sometimes what people do is that they provide a simulation data, those simulation data would have all those attributes or parameters of your research already. So it's easy for the panel to know that when this student start doing experimental research, the data that the student gonna obtain is basically hardware data, but the overall parameter will be similar to those simulation data. So when they do comparison, it's just finding the error percentage between simulation and also hardware data. Okay, so that is one. Sometimes you for social sciences, you never take the survey respondent, but you have a tool already, and then based on the tool, you see that there's certain research being conducted and other research output has been obtained, and those output is something that what you want to employ for your output. So you can actually employ the output from other people's research. This is the same output that I would want to have in my research. So the good thing about this is that whatever research that other people do in social science, whatever instruments or tools that they use, that can be employed exactly similar to your research, but then your topic may be a little bit different as compared to their topic. All right. So this section is basically kind of critical for your part here. So in this section, you have to make sure you cover the following. Any way your work can challenge the existing theories or assumption in your field. So you need to write that down. How would your work go back to challenging maybe certain research? How would your work align to certain policy? You know, all this you should cover here. How your work will create foundation to future research. The practical value of finding will provide practitioner, educator, and other academics in your field. How would your work do that? How will your result fix other people's problem? How would your research help in drafting a policy? And then lastly, how is your finding can be implemented in academia and other organization. All right. So in other words, this section isn't about stating specific result. Rather, it will be showing you how your finding will be valuable. Meaning to say that upon obtaining this result, your research can help what? That's why remember, I said always bring back your national policies, your SDGs. At the end, because at the end of the day, right, that is the one that you're trying to solve. So it should be something easy for you to get uh, uh, or to actually point finger what you will solve. Okay, so that is this section, which is somewhat rather like a preliminary result. We call it more of a supposition. Okay. All right. So then after you've done preliminary result, you have already given the panel to know what are you actually trying to do and what is your result gonna help the nation and so on. How long you're gonna do this? This is very important. Your milestone. Like say for example, if you're talking about master student minimum duration 2 years. But are you gonna put the entire 2 years for project? No, because you need to always remember your master is 2 years. But for you to complete, when we talk about completion of masters, it's also including writing thesis. But if your thesis is going to take 6 months, basically your project should be completed within 1.5 years. All right. And if you are the type, like basically write while you're doing your research, even that also you should keep some time for you to do proofreading services, for you to go into correction phases. Uh, Maybe your supervisors will not be reading like every day. They will take time to read your thesis. So these are all the times that you need to basically to make sure that you graduate on time. So when I talk about minimum duration 2 years, it's about you submit, hopefully complete your examination and complete the entire program. So keep that under your milestone. So in your mind, master student, 1 year, 1.5 years project. The balance, writing thesis, writing papers, so on. For PhD student, 3 years, 2.5 years, or 2 years. 2 years for you to do your experiment, proposal, defense, everything. Third year onwards, writing thesis already. Data collection shouldn't be in your third year. If you are still collecting data in your third year, uh, people like me will know that you will not complete your PhD in the third year. You'll probably extend your PhD in another semester or another year. So it's very important you set your milestone now itself. That's the reason why all postgraduate students, we ask you all to take the research method subject because that will supposedly teach you how to do this. and basically timeline to streamline the project. For example, let us say like this. I have stages of my project or my methodology, and I have a timeline. So by October, I need to settle item number 1. By January 2012, I need to settle item number 2, so on and so forth. From here, you'll see the item number 8, report submission / paper submission / grant submission, whatever. Before or by June 2014, it should be going out of my hands and being reviewed by people. Okay, keep that in mind, very important. Then, okay, this is now going offhand because PhD master research, you wouldn't have budget in because it's irrelevant to research for postgraduate by research student. You do not need to think so much about budget because the reason for budget in a proposal is because we are writing budget to get the money, to obtain the money from certain grant providers, research fund providers. So when they provide you fund, they want to know how much of it you are allocating for certain budget. Okay, so it normally goes in the 7. All right, you do not go more or less in research. You will normally pay for all the 7 only. So the first thing is when you talk about talent, as a applicant, a principal investigator for a grant, you will normally have something you call as a research assistant or a graduate research assistant. The difference between that is a research assistant is not doing postgraduate. A graduate research assistant is actually doing a postgraduate studies. Okay, so depending on a grant holder, and you can actually pay them. They are your research assistant before they are the postgraduate student. So we have students here in KDU, in UOW also, that we are paying them to do the research, and then they are actually doing research for certain grants. So talent is one part of the budget where you need to allocate. You need to pay people to start doing work for you. Very simple thing, like maybe you got no time to go and get the respondent or submit survey questionnaire at certain region. You can employ somebody to go and do that for you, pass them your survey questionnaire, and they will cover that particular region while you cover this region. So the more graduate research assistant or research assistant you have, the more easy the easier your work is going to be, because then again you have assigned them to do certain works. So that are the first budget that you need to look at. Second is travel and transportation. This is definitely true because whenever you talk about research, you need money to go and travel to certain places, and then you need certain money for transportation, for like toll, many things, like oil price, for you to use flight to go to other country to take research maybe. So travel and transportation, you need to allocate certain budget, and certain grant providers will basically give you that amount already. That means you cannot apply more than this, less than this, and so on and so forth. Okay, so they will normally have a shilling where you can apply for, and you shouldn't be applying more than that. So when you set a budget for that, always remember that travel and transportation shouldn't go more than 40% out of the entire budget. Okay, if it goes more than 40%, grant providers will have in their mind is that only thing you want to use, because 40% of your grant you want to use for traveling. So they are skeptical. They're thinking that will you really do your project, or will you come back with just traveling this one? Just to share with you one example, actually true life example is that I know there is a case where a person was actually funded by the government to go and take images of certain exotic insects. And this person is not an expert in basically taking image of an insect, because when we talk about taking image of an insect, it's not just taking phone and taking it like that. It's no. You need to take every part of every dimension of the insect basically, because it's more about the morphology or the image part of the insect. So there is a method for you to take image of an insect. So a grant recipient from a government organization funded the project, sent the person to two countries, UK and US, only US, to the Museum of exotic insects. And when the person came back, and the person was the only person who gonna bring the initial data back, he found that the data is no use because the only way he took the images was just snapping the picture only. And that image cannot be used for morphological or image determining the image features of the insect. The entire thing go to waste already. So you see how much of a money being put for travel expenses just to obtain data. By the end, when they return, the data is not of no use. And you can ask yourself, that means can the amount of money now be used for travel for to send now somebody who is knowing how to snap a photo? No, because this budget has already been allocated under item number 2. So you need to find some other money for you to fund the project, to fund the person to now go and take picture of that image. Okay, true story. This is true story. Yeah? Okay, so item number 3 is rental. So some of y'all maybe would not own your own cars, or maybe you are doing certain research which requires transfer of huge amount of equipment. So you need to rent a lorry. So a lorry means you need to rent a 4-wheel drive, for example. So it can bring you together with your research equipments together. So maybe you need to rent that. So an amount of rental has to be allocated for this portion as well. There's no fixed amount for rental, but it's better for you to at least allocate around 15 to 20% of the entire budget for this, because sometimes if you cannot purchase equipment which costs 1 million, 2 million, but you can rent the equipment. There are certain institutions that allows people to rent equipments, so that you don't, even if you don't buy, you can rent them. You can actually allocate rental for that. 4th is research material and supplies. So like for example, if you say myself, when I was doing my PhD, most of my material are chemical material. So we need to allocate funding for research material. But that being said, during the time when I was purchasing all those chemical, before purchasing that, we need to get a license from a reputable chemical storing facility to allow these kinds of purchase to be happening. So me being an infant at that time, not say infant in terms of age, like infant in terms of, well, I'm still infant now, but then, for in terms of my research progress, we just thought that it is just a purchase and it can actually be bought. But it was held in custom because we didn't get proper clearance. And to get custom clearance, there's a certain amount of payment and authority needs to be sought, which we did not include as a budget in our research. So what happened was we need to fork out our own money to pay for these particular things. So when I go for risk factor later on in the slide, you need to look in this particular factor. You need to be clear. If you buy material, does this material needs to go through custom clearance or not? Some things you might think it's not, but it is. Sometimes even buying Raspberry Pi, for example, a simple microcontroller device from other country, can actually create suspicion to custom because you're not paying certain duty fees and so on, because you're directly buying it from China. Certain ceramics being purchased, of course, you can buy it through online. But if those are things which is restricted and needs a custom clearance, you need to allocate certain amount of budget for you to first, pay for clearance and also pay for, transportation for that to here. These are all the things you really have to know. A minor maintenance and renovation. For example, your equipment is there for long and you need to calibrate them. And only after you calibrate them, it can be used for your project. So it's very important that you use this accordingly. All right. And then finally, professional services. In grants, you will need a lot of professional services, especially for social science. If you want to get survey respondent. So normally the method is for you to, apart from you drafting a survey questionnaire, have some budget to give a token of appreciation for your respondent so that they feel the need to answer your questionnaire. Nowadays, people don't spare time to go and answer questionnaires if it's nothing for them. That's why sometimes you can see in emporiums, in shopping complex, there are a lot of booths for you to just answer survey questionnaire. And in order to bring you to that particular table, they will hold like a teddy bear or a keychain, just like a carrot to bring you to particular place for so that you can answer the questionnaire and get advantage out of it. So these are all professional services. Apart from that, proofreading services. Maybe when you apply for grant, you are not a native English speaker, a native speaker, like for example. But the data is there, the write-up is there, but then you need some improvement in terms of English. So proofreading services is very important for you to add in there as well. Apart from this is honorarium. Honorarium can be done. You want to go and pay fees for training. Like say you want to equip yourself with certain knowledge and you find that there is certain course which is maybe 1 week or 2 weeks that you can attend and attain certain knowledge. Professional service is something for you to allocate budget for. Conferences fee, you want to pay conference fee, you want to go for conference. The conference fee is professional services. To travel to the conference is number two, travel and transportation. So keep that into consideration. Do not put the entire travel, transportation, conference fee under the professional services. No. For you to travel from Malaysia to other country is item number two. For you to pay for the registration fee, for you to pay for all any fees is number six. Okay. Then we go lastly to the item number seven, which is basically for those in science and technologies, you want to buy asset. You want to buy asset here doesn't mean like houses and so on. We talk about asset as a formal name for whatever purchase under this budget. Whatever purchase under more than 5,000 and all that sometimes consider as asset because you can buy PC, you can buy laptop, you can even yes, you can even buy what do you call that, a building. Yes, there are certain grants that allows you to do that. You can buy research materials, research softwares, all that goes under equipment. Another one thing about softwares is that certain software below certain range of price goes on rental because you are paying on license. But certain software one-off, but the price is so high. Like for example, Mental Graphic one-time license also is costing around 30 to 40,000 Malaysian ringgit. So that one goes under asset already, goes under equipment already. So price range according to price range. Cloud services, number three, rental, because you're paying it on a maybe monthly or yearly basis, it goes under rental. Okay, so budgeting is important for those people who are writing for proposal. Okay, so we have done with milestone and budget. Lastly, a lot of people would not agree that we need to have conclusion in proposal, but the conclusion here serves like a section, just like the conclusion wherever you write. It briefly summarizes your research proposal and reinforces your research stated purpose. So it is more of a summary of your research. So when they read conclusion, they must know entire whatever you propose, you will try to conclude from this project what you tend to achieve, what you tend to solve, who you tend to help, so on and so forth. Okay, so I have given you all the entire structure of a proposal, and if you minus the budget part, it is basically the proposal that you can write for postgraduate studies by research, by coursework, or you want to write your papers. So these are normal template, but the only difference is when it comes to budgeting, that's a different thing. In fact, if you write for grant, there's additional things that you may want to write. So what I'm going to do now, because I've been speaking for so long, I'm just going to give you all a 10 minutes break. Now it is 5:17. 10 minutes break will be around 5:27. So we will continue in 5:27 and wrap up the entire session. I still have a bit of a slide. Many of it is just like images and so on. I will try to finish. I think we're going to finish sharp at 6 o'clock. All right. Before we go for break, any question? Can I have any questions? Therapeutic range. Any questions for this so far? Okay, you keep writing your question in your chat box, and you can go for a break, and we shall continue 5:27. Correct, yes. All these are the range, like what the CEO was saying. Uh, the parameter that we are talking about, yes, desired standard range and so on. Correct. This is for objective, right? I think under the measurement part. Okay. All right. So yes, I will turn off my camera now. We shall all return back in 5:27. Take care. Okay, can we continue now? It's 5:27, quite fast. We need to finish before at least around 5:50. Are you all back? Can I get a reply? Yes or what? Okay. How about the rest? How about the rest? There's only, if I'm not mistaken, 7 participants here. The rest have left. All right, so I will just start, yeah? Okay. So continuing from that previously, basically what I have left out is based from that is after conclusion is that we need to look or consider the bibliography and references. So one rule of thumb you have to always remember when writing proposal is that the research support is supposed to be fresh. Those research that you're taking references or bibliography is supposed to be within 5 years. 5 years will be the optimum one, though a lot of people will say 10 years. But 5 years in terms of grant, the last 5 years is something for you to take as a reference. For example, if this is 2022, so 2021, you can take 2022 research papers, 2021, 2020, 2019, and also until 2018. So talking about you starting to write your research proposal, you can only try to take at least 90% of your research references should be within 5 years. Like the remaining 10%, you can take like the historical part because some research, maybe the fundamental dated even before, the like 20 to 30 years ago also. So you want to use that as fundamental. So sometimes the fundamental cannot run away because that's the year it was invented. That's the year the methodology was implied or implemented and so on. So you cannot go away with not taking that year of a research paper. But then for all the other things to justify, especially very important, when I say literature review, that one have to be 5 years. If you take beyond 5 years and you start to critically arguing that, people are saying that you are just arguing based on old technology, old research, something which is irrelevant. Probably from 10 years from that, new things has already come up. So that's the justification to see whether a person's research proposal is of quality, mainly because they are taking references which are fresh within 5 years. Put that in your mind. 5 years is very important. Don't take anything uh, after 5 years. Okay. We will go more on references like because as postgraduate students and also maybe some lecturers, we don't go on bibliography. You don't want to state whatever you read, you put it there. No, the references should be something purely related to your research field. You don't take something general, even though some people might think that you take a lot of a lot of literature implies that you have higher knowledge. Not necessarily true. That is also evidence because recently we had one student, basically one of the critics. The student research was good, splendid, but one of the critic is too many literature review, and in which some of it is not related to the research. It was critically reviewed, but it wasn't justified in the research why it was critically reviewed. Okay, so be aware of what you're writing. If those things is not relevant to your research, my personal suggestion is don't add them in your report. Okay. Now we're going on a process to write proposal. So we talked about what are the items important in a proposal. Now we're going to talk about how to write a proposal. So these are the 6 steps that is famously known: brainstorming, preparing to write, writing your first draft, editing. All these kinds of things is quite common. Some of you will be saying, I know how to do this, but some of us sometimes tend not to follow the pathway. Some of us straight away go to editing, revising, and randomly, going all over our research proposal, but not doing it in a proper pathway. Okay. So for brainstorming, for example, you need to think deeply about the topic that you'll be covering in your writing and let your mind flow and everything come across. So when I talk about brainstorming, right, this is literally brainstorming as in like whatever idea comes in your mind, like say you have new research, just jot them down in a piece of paper, you know. So this stage is very important, and this is the stage where for us, right, is where we have the supervisor student understanding form. This is the part where you need to do brainstorming together with your supervisor. You need to basically throw facts, your supervisor will throw justification until you guys can streamline and find this is the thing that you're going to do. The problem of not doing this early is that later on, you will always have dispute with your supervisor because both of you all cannot agree with what you're going to do. If this has been thought of earlier, you could have been doing this and your supervisor have idea of what you are doing accordingly. All right. It's just like this image, like a fruit. Everything is tasty, everything is healthy, everything is good. But and this is basically we call it fruitful idea. You have fruitful idea. So you have all the thing on the plate. This is what it's supposed to be. And at this stage, this is what it's supposed to be looking like. A lot of things may be looking good, but then the next stage is where you need to look at what you're preparing to write. So all these ideas can be coming from brainstorming. You know, you have ideas, correction, conclusion, all that you need to organize them into an outline. Meaning to say that the one that we see here, which is your fruits, you need to now choose already which fruit you want to continue to do. Okay, so that is what preparing to write stands for. Okay, so at this stage, you know, you're going to take all your ideas and organizing them into outline. These outlines are basically like a skeleton of a finished piece of writing that maybe maps the topic that you'll cover, where each paragraph fits into maybe certain pieces. All right, it provides structure. Okay, it helps ensure that your idea flows logically and clearly. So this is basically streamlining. I'm seeing something like this, like a cone, an upside down cone. You start off by brainstorming. Slowly, you start to streamline to something that is doable. Okay. Then the next is choosing authoritative sources. Once you already determine the topic that you want to do, now go on finding references. This is the pathway of literature search. Even literature search, there is a pathway because you don't go and randomly find for information. Like I said just now in my example, go to Google and then find. Yes, for certain things, but no for research, because in research, whatever information that you get has to be reputable, and those reputation can only be obtained based on the quality of the publisher. So my recommendation is always use, even Google, use Google Scholar. Okay, get journals, get conference papers and all that. Avoid using social media, avoid using sometimes blogs, because these are all write-ups. At certain point also, sometimes some people don't like to use Wikipedia because it's easily editable by public. You know, not to question its knowledge, but sometimes it may not be true also because other people have, due to the chance where other people can actually come in and write something in there. So choose reputable sources, authoritative sources, choose appropriate format. Like for example, IEEE format for you to do referencing and so on. Okay. Striking the right tone. So what does it mean? This is the next step in the writing process. Basically, it's more about preparing to write lah. Okay. In this stage, you are basically more about trying to, you know, when you're unsure which part of your research is clear and so on, you kind of think of what kind of tone you will use for your research. So when you talk about tone, right, this is whether you're doing persuasive tones or you know, depending on the type of the type of proposals that you're writing. You can, you know, basically be figuring out your right tone in writing it easy. Like, so if it's an essay or maybe some academic writing, right, you can have a normal formal tone lah. But for example, like you're doing a promotion article, so your tone needs to be more engaging, like highlighting the benefit and the cons of other competitors and so on and so forth. For example, if you're doing like a cover letter, your cover letter for your work, for example, so your tone should be more confident, yet not arrogant, and so on. So if you are still not sure of what kinds of tone for you to write in your proposal, this is where your supervisor comes in, because he or she may be able to structurize your vocabulary and the overall tone. This one can be as simple, you might not notice this, but what you are talking, what you're speaking, sometimes people tends to write that down. That means when I read certain theses, sometimes it'll be more in a way where they are speaking to you rather than they are writing what do you call that? An article, a formal article. Okay, so that kinds of things is where sometimes you need to really look properly. Okay, then after you have done that, this is where you start writing your first draft. This is where you finally ready to write at this stage. Okay, writing the draft of the proposal. From here onwards, you don't worry about making your writing perfect. Don't worry about languages. You just go on a rampage, write a draft, but then go on a structured base. Still the structure that I give you, write that down. And then get the word on the page. Whatever that you're thinking, put it out on the page here. So you use the outline that I give you in the previous slide. Start by doing that. You don't have to basically, like for example, right, the students might think, if I sit down, I need to finish a proposal. No, you can take step by step, take your time off, write whatever you think that is coming out, then start writing your proposal. Okay. The good thing will happen for this is that when your mind is relaxed, most of the information can easily come out. And those things are some things that you can actually churn out, warm it out, for example. Okay. So writing your first draft is next. Then it goes on to your editing. Okay, so basically here, right, editing, sometimes you need your supervisor, sometimes you can use your proofreading services, because after you've come out with a draft, editing is something that you really need to focus on, because this one can take a lot of time. Just editing a single page paragraph can take a very, very long time. Another one problem postgraduate students face with their supervisor is that this one quite common. If you are feeling it, then understand that it's common. Supervisors tend to read students' thesis over and over and over again at the same page, because the same page will not be right any time of the day you read. In the morning you read, sounds okay. In the afternoon you read, it's different. The next day you read different. And then the next month you read, you still want to change it. You cannot have a perfect report. What you can have is a lot of information given there. What I'm talking about here is the intonation, the information, the language, and all that. These are the parts. But what should be addressed early on is vocabulary, grammar. That one should be done with also, dealt with also. It shouldn't be in that issue in the report. Okay, so make sure in order for you to get approval, at least for publication, is that certain publication wants the author to submit together the proofreading receipt that they have submitted. For example, I'm writing a journal paper. My journal paper is going to be submitted to maybe Scientific Report or some other reputable journal. That journal would not accept my journal. That journal body wouldn't accept my paper if it doesn't come together with a proofreading receipt. That means they want authors to get that proofreading done before submitting to their journal. So there are a lot of publication nowadays going on that, and there are a lot of proofreading services available for you to do this as well. Okay, so editing is revising is one thing quite important also. Like I said, edit with fresh eyes. If you are tired and all that, don't continue writing. You cool off and you come another day or another time, and then you write that. So because taking time between writing and editing, you are giving yourself some time or distance from your work. Trust me, by doing these things, you can write even better compared to stressing yourself to write in the morning until afternoon. No, go by time. Okay, so edit with fresh eyes. So with fresh eyes, look for logical inconsistencies or error. This is where when you have fresh, those things that you oversee, that can suddenly appear. You might think that you have done that perfectly, but when you go back and then come back again, you see that error is there. Okay, these are common. So if you feel that there's something happening because of you, no, this is common. to everybody, even professional book writers also will come back to find flaw in their writing. Okay. Next is we will go on proofreading your final draft. So proofreading your final draft, like I mentioned, it is a service that you need to do before you submitting to any grant applications or holders and so on. So it is very important at this stage that you complete the entire write-up, figures, tables, everything put in there, and then only send for proofreading services so that they can actually capture that. Some free softwares are available like Grammarly. I myself use Grammarly, not the paid version, but it's actually worth it if you want to use the paid version because it does a lot of things quite well for you. One thing good about Grammarly is also that you can actually download the software online for Word and for anything that you're gonna, even for Facebook, if you want to write social media, that particular portion will have Grammarly popping up to correct your grammar also. So it's very good that over the years when you use that, you improve your grammar also. Where previously Grammarly needs to correct, even without using Grammarly, you suddenly start to add those particular words. So things to remember, Grammarly is something that you want to look for. Take this word, Google and get the one, download the Word version, PowerPoint version, internet version, any version. It's a plugin. So plugin for you to improve your language in social media, in online write-up and so on. All right, so these softwares can catch last-minute mistakes and slip past you, that slip past you and help you avoid embarrassment. Okay. And then only finally publishing your final work. So when you publish your final work, this is at the stage where it's important for you to, you are done with everything. So where you want to publish, you publish in terms of postgraduate student, submission for proposal defense or submission for a subject. In terms of grant holder, submitting for a grant application, so on and so forth. Okay. Common mistake to avoid when writing a research proposal, very important. When you are writing a research proposal, avoid this common pitfall, being too wordy. Some of y'all very good in words. Sometimes it's not necessarily true to write too much. If you are too wordy, so sometimes you make the reader sleep. Okay. So in fact, you should aim to keep your writing as brief as possible. Go straight to the point. Sometimes you can say certain things like certain flowery words like I cannot remember now, but certain flowery words that you will use like in my opinion, this is something that at the highest side of the research. So in my personal opinion, you can remove it. You can just straight go for based on the result, data A has higher percentage compared to data B. Straightforward. So you don't need to put the flowery word, in my opinion, nonetheless, where else, all this kind of thing you don't need. Straight away go to your point. All right. Failing to cite relevant sources. So that's one thing also quite important. Whatever you paraphrase and all that, you don't cite them. That is actually a serious offense in the first place. But then you are actually also protecting yourself by certain claims that other researchers might be doing. So just to justify your claim also. So failing to cite relevant sources is one misconduct, also one thing, and also something to ponder about. And also focusing too much on minor issues. These are probably a lot of great reasons why your research is necessary. These reasons don't all need to be in your research proposal. Meaning to say what? Like I said before, if cost is something that is not relevant to your research, you don't need to add that in your research because there are other issues in your research that is a problem. And cost can be something as a minor thing also. So don't need to put petty problem into your research proposal. Go straight forward for the big catch. Okay. So whatever that comes along with the research problem also, you don't really need to declare in your thesis. So some people quite early stage of some students submission, the problem statement itself, they'll include the problem in their research, problem in the experiment, problem in collecting data and so on. You don't need to do that. Those are minor issues. Those are non-relevant to your research. So don't add that into that, all right? So, and then don't add too many questions, research questions, too many objective. No, don't do that. Like I said, objective 3, maximum 4. The moment you go to 5, it's too much already. Okay, but for social science and all that, I know there's some rules where objective can go quite a lot also lah. Again, you have your supervisor to guide you to determine how much is fast and not much lah. Okay. Then the another one thing is that failing to make strong argument for your research. Subjective. Remember I said everything is too general. Everything is too general where people cannot draw, uh, cannot get an output or cannot get an information regarding your project. They cannot know what is your scope, what are you actually doing. So everything is so general. So you should not be that. Another one thing is that persuasive writings means that although you are presenting your proposal in perhaps objective and also in academic way, but the overall goal is actually to get your readers to say approve. So always remember that no matter how flowery and also persuasive you write, the objective is to get your readers to say yes to your work, yes to your proposal, yes to your thesis. Okay, that's the only thing matters. So the way you write should be really important. Okay. Next is I'm sharing with you one website called lens.org. This is very important for students as well, in my opinion, because it is a free pattern search database. Why is this important is because a lot of time grant holders or grant providers would ask researchers to declare whether their project is actually new. Nowadays, like I said, quite hard to get anything which is new. There is always an addition to an existing product or trying to improve certain products. Okay. So when you want to determine whether your research is actually new or not, you can actually use lens.org to see whether have your research been done before, anything that is regarding your research been in a product before, and so on. Why is this important? Is for you to protect yourself to do a research that has not been done before. If you can find people have been doing that, perhaps in an abroad or another country, then it's safe to say that maybe in Malaysia, you can do the research because there's nobody in Malaysia that have done this research before. So that one is a good thing. Okay, so go and maybe you can write lens.org and search. Another one thing, this is for grant holders and not for proposal writers and not for students also. In fact, in a way also maybe it's important. If your project, your research project has collaboration from industry, it has merits. So if you're applying for a grant and your grant has like a collaboration between two entities and you are applying for the grant applicant to provide the grant, they will actually look at the grant worthiness because you applied, like you say, the output of your research will help certain industry. So grant provider would like to fund for these kinds of grant. So it's important that at least if you're writing for a grant, for a research grant, you have all these collaborators with you. As a postgraduate student, you don't necessarily need to, but your supervisors, when they are writing for grant, they will basically add all this inside. Okay, that's important. Then next we go for risk assessment. Risk is very, very important. Okay, assessing the risk especially is even utmost important. You need to understand or basically determine what are the risks that you can actually face when applying for grant, for example. For example, failure to purchase the equipment. You see A here, meaning to say what? You have the money, but you cannot purchase the equipment on time because of certain constraint or maybe price increase and all that. You need to expect you might be not able to purchase certain equipment. Imagine you started writing for a proposal early January. When you get the grant, you'll get it in September. But along the way, the raw material price increases, creates the price hike in all the equipment. By the time you receive the amount of money for you to do your grant, your money or allocated fund will not be sufficient to purchase the equipment. So these are the things that you need to understand. There are risks involved and there are certain things that will happen in this case. Equipment doesn't arrive on time. And since we are talking about milestone timeline, the milestone should include when the equipment comes and the experiment starts. But then the equipment doesn't arrive on time. What happens is that the research prolongs or extends. So causes the timeline to also head a step back. Okay. Equipment malfunction under maintenance. That's why in your research grant, you need to make sure you have some funding for maintenance so that if it malfunctions and so on, you can basically use the grant for this purpose. Postgraduate student gave up. Yes, we have the case that project running, then student being funded under the project, but then the student gave up because it's either too tough for the student to do and so on. But remember that money has been paid to the student and the student just leave like that. Okay, so these are all the risks. Delay in milestone goes back to all the other issues, which is will cause delay in milestone. Company shuts down, goes back to maybe A or B. The reason for company shutdown is because maybe like in COVID time, most of the company, cannot, is not in the profitable range. They shut down the company. But your equipments, your tests and all that, depending on the company to operate. So problem. Failure to obtain approval from the relevant authority to conduct the research in the area of research interest. Your survey questionnaire you need to distribute at a certain company because maybe your questionnaire is about getting the information from company personnel to answer. But then finally, the company do not allow you to come in to take respondent. Your entire project proposal has already gone through expecting a questionnaire at that particular company, but now cannot. So what do you do? It's a risk that you have to also find an alternative company. Team members, collaboration company withdrawn also can happen. You're expert in your project. When we send grant, right, we will have expert, apart from you being the main researcher, you will have certain expert in the grant. But that expert have their own roles and responsibility in the project, but suddenly they withdraw. So you don't have that expert in your grant. So that is a problem. Currency rate increase or price. Like now, like say we have applied a grant last year. Now the current Malaysian currency is very bad. It's around 4.5. One USD is 4.5 ringgit Malaysia. It's quite bad. So higher price. If you want to buy equipment from US or your transaction is in US, this is where pretty much you will expect these kinds of hike to happen. And you wouldn't have money to pay for this. Okay. Then that is that. And then we talk about funding output. So in terms of funding output, in terms of grants, we talk about normally what is the output. For funding output is normally grants and also PhD student, master student, publication, intellectual property, impact to society, novel theory. Meaning to say what? If you apply for a grant, definitely a grant provider will expect what is the output. So grant providers will expect output such as talent, like I said, which are PhD and master student. They would want publications. They would want product. They would want their product to have an impact to the society. That's the reason why they fund you in the first place. And those products should be something new so that they have some chances in the later in the market for them to sell. Okay, that is output for grant. In terms of research, like now your proposal, what is your output? These are all the outputs that you might have, be it fundamental, be it applied. At the end of your research project, it can be that you develop a kit, you identify diagnostic methodologies, tools, system, databases, a profiling method, new plant variant, a new species, equipment, instrument, you draft a new policy. Not all, I'm not saying that one person's research should come out with this. No. These are the output of the research. Okay, basically, some of your research work now, the output may be in either one of these items here. Okay, it can be new theory, it can be a system, so on and so forth. So all this is something that you should focus on. After this is something that, since this is the output, where you're going to submit these to in order for you to have an advantage for future project. And then why do grants fail? Basically, when we talk about proposal, why do grants fail and so on? The main reason is because of the write-up. Okay, no doubt that it's all about the write-up. And in terms of write-up, we talk about the objective not clear, literature review not currently written, methodology not enough, project coverage limited, scope too much, researchers has not identified the problem, still very blur in the proposal, no coherent research plan or proposed, you don't know what you're trying to do. And then not fundamental. For example, if you're writing fundamental-based research, the grant proposal is not a fundamental proposal, it's more applied, or vice versa. If it's an applied grant, it's not, you're writing fundamental, so it's not good. Number 10, no new findings. Number 11, proposal does not discuss the novelty and fundamental. Number 12, it does not highlight the significance or the output of the study. Number 13, old technology. This is what very important. You research on something, at the end you come up with a proposal, but people who are in the expert area will know that this is an obsolete research already. A lot of people done it, done deal. You don't need to talk about that anymore. So they are the comments from the panel. These are actual comments from panel. I just extracted it from the files that I received for certain grants that has been rejected. And 14, proposal lacks research element. So these are the items that will normally be the reason why proposal being rejected. Okay. And then before we end, is just the do's and don'ts of writing a proposal, at least for a grant. The do things, very important, even for proposal, students. You have to make sure you refer to certain good journals to write a good technical proposal. If you have a journal, right, it can be a benchmark or a guideline for you to write a proposal. Then you will know the structure. Okay. Other than that, find an experienced mentor. Your supervisor now is somebody who would guide you on your research proposal writing. In terms of grant, the person that comes together with you in your research is very important to build the rapport for the grant. So when the grant provider sees, if he sees you not experienced, sees your co-researcher is experienced, confidence level can be high because he would think that you may be mentored by the experienced researcher. Okay, do a proper risk assessment and then find contingency plan. Like I said, equipment, price range and all that. Sometimes grant people, what they do is they mark up the price. And then last do's is collaboration with industry. Justify your project with collaboration with industry. The don'ts is basically don't write a proposal that doesn't match the grant philosophy. Don't overpromise the output. Certain grants have an output. You don't overpromise that. You just follow according to what they want. And then inconsistent budgeting. What does it mean? In your methodology, you say you need the equipment, but in your budget, there's no any indication of applying for writing that. Okay, so that is do's and don'ts. And then finally, I'm summarizing our talk now. It's already 6 o'clock. Overall, make sure that your project proposal is concise, has a solid objective, problem-oriented, clear and detailed research methodology. It should have a proper milestone project activity, up-to-date references, detailed and convincing budget, indicate the area of expertise, and also indicate the status of the research that will be performed, timestamp or infographic. All these should be in the item of your research proposal. Okay, so with that, thank you for listening. I end my training here. Maybe I will just open up for a 1-minute Q&A. If you have any, I will just have a 1 minute. If you have anything. Yes, okay. In terms of references, I have a question here. 10 years for textbook and professional books. For me, personally, 10 years is something that if the research is still new, so 10 years, for example, we talk about digital currency. So digital currency up till now is just dated 10 years ago. Started off with Bitcoins and then, it starts flourishing. So 10 years is a good thing for you to start looking at the historical event of this particular research. But then if we talk about relevance of certain point of the research, then 5 years is the time. When you want to talk about book materials is for reference like historical and also some theoretical equations. These are the things that you can take from book, but not up-to-date research. Whatever books that you have is perhaps a new edition sometimes you can have new research lah, but then the new edition, third edition, fourth edition, doesn't count as 5 years recent research. So we want in at least in the literature review side, people to talk about recent technology, recent research, and so on. Okay, yeah. I hope I answer your question. How about any other question? Yeah. Any other question? I'm only seeing Miss Yeo is asking. Any other question? I see there's a lot of postgraduate students here. No problem. Something out of the topic. Okay. The difference between meta-analysis. Okay, so where do I go for to talk about meta-analysis? Uh, there's a lot of level of it is basically meta-analysis goes under, I should say, some of it will be discussed in the methodology side, uh, because it's more of like a systematic way of how you synthesize and you merge your findings lah, between two or more studies using certain statistical model lah. Okay, those kinds of analysis is normally can be found in correlation studies as well. Uh, that's why they call it as a meta-analysis, like how you link between two different distinct poles. So, for example, not necessarily be distinct poles. How do you link them to have a correlation between that? For example, in computer science terminology, we call it like for example, market basket analysis. So in terms of market basket analysis, uh, the research will go in a way where if user buys one and user buys another one, what is the most likelihood the user will buy an item which is not related to that first two items? Okay, so how do you do that kinds of analysis? Uh, Even for this also, there is a lot of trainings on that. So if you really want to have these kinds of it, I can actually incorporate literature review and also meta-analysis training together. Maybe I will uh, put it through the teaching and learning department to see whether we can have a training just for that. Okay. Yes, same thing, because meta-analysis is critique on research finding, but overall, right, if you really look at the definition of this, right, it's more of a research process to systematically, kind of like correlate between two different research and also contradict research, but it has to have use of certain statistical data, all right, to basically calculate something we call as an absolute value. Okay, you don't really you can apply that in literature review, but mostly when you talk about meta-analysis, right, it's going on what does data A in literature review A say, data B in literature review B say, and how do you correlate them together? So when you talk about critically review, this is in a way where you can either contradict both of them or you can support both of them together also. That'll be great. Okay. Yeah, good. I will maybe put it through because I'm not too much into this meta-analysis kind of person. My research is more on experimental research, and we don't really go too much into contradicting kind of a study, going more on applied base and so on. Okay. Yep. I will put that in my mind. I will mention this to Mr. Gabriel in TNL. Any other questions before we end? It's already 6:06. I hope I'm not boring. I hope my presentation was interesting. I hope if you have gained certain knowledge from my presentation, from my training, then I am happy to hear that. In case, another one thing, in case, thank you very much. I was wondering, is it really boring because it's wordy and so on. But yeah, I think you are the one who's asking a lot of questions, yeah, as well as some other students also. I'm writing my email here. If you need to ask me any other question, you can send your questions in my email here. At least something that maybe you don't want to ask here, you can ask in email, uh, and I will be glad to reply to you all. Okay? All right. So with that, I will end the session. Thank you very much for attending. Until I see you all for the next training. Take care. Bye bye. Stay safe. Yeah, pleasant weekend to all of you all as well. Happy weekend. Yeah, welcome, welcome, Alicia.